Chapter 654. The Rue Family Inn was the largest inn in Yonne County. It was also the most famous inn in the entire Shu Prefecture. Although the inn had only been built for less than a year, because of its comfortable environment, attentive service, and friendly price, its reputation had long spread. Regardless of whether it was a passerby or a passing merchant, they were all willing to stay here. Single rooms, standard rooms, husband and wife rooms, family rooms, luxurious rooms, chess rooms, and a series of rooms were available to meet the needs of all kinds of guests. Although it was located in the desolate Shu Prefecture, the business of the Rue Family Inn had always been booming. Since they moved here, in just a few months, 3 inns in Yonne County had closed. Even the shops had been bought by the Rue Family Inn. It should be time to open a branch. Just like the name of the inn, it was like home. It gave its guests the feeling of being at home. Step by step, the Rue Family Inn had clearly achieved this. At this time, it was only early in the morning, but there were already many people busy at the entrance of the inn. Erlang, move quickly. We need to set up the platform before noon. A bare-chested man was moving things out of the hostel next to the inn. He turned around and urged another skinny figure. The young man laughed and said, "Big brother, don't worry. We can make it." Someone behind him teased, "Old Jew, why are you moving so little at once? Are you tired from having fun with the brothel girls yesterday? Let me give you a piece of advice. It's fine to go to brothels every now and then. How can you go there 3 times a day?" This man's name was Zhu Dong. He had a younger brother at home. Everyone usually called him Zhu Daolang. The 2 brothers were originally butchers and later worked in the brothel. After interacting with each other for a while, they were already familiar with each other. Zhu Daolang waved his hand and scolded, "Get out of here. I don't need you to care about my business. Hurry up. If you're late and make the manager unhappy, you'll lose this month's bonus. You're just afraid that you won't have a bonus." A burst of laughter came from behind him. Inside the inn, a waiter walked out and asked, "Hey, old Jew, you're here again today. You guys are making so much noise outside. Aren't you disturbing our business?" "Bah." Zhu Daolang cast a sidelong glance at him and said, "Disturbing your business, has your conscience been eaten by a dog? Without us, would your business be so good?" The waiter smiled sheepishly and hurried over to help him unload the things on his shoulders and put them on the empty space beside him. The brothel business was booming. When it was mealtime, some people were too lazy to go back, so they just ate in the inn. It was also a great boost to their business. To a certain extent, the reason why the Rue Family Inn was so popular was because there was a brothel next to it. When the guests were free, they only needed to take a few steps downstairs to find a place to spend their time. Of course, although one of them worked in an inn and the other worked in a brothel, they were still a family. Back then, it had been a tough journey, so they didn't care about these small matters. "Hey, that brothel is going to have a benefit performance again today. It's rare. I've missed it the last few times. I'll come over to reserve a seat after I finish my meal. I don't know what to sing today. I like Legend of the White Snake, I like Pua Mulan. Mu Guiying is fine too." The passers-by stood in the distance and whispered to each other. There were also people coming out of the surrounding shops to take a look. The show at the brothel was really good. Every once in a while, they would bring out the stage to perform for free. It would be a waste not to watch it. They had to reserve a seat now, or they would have to stand in a while. Li Yi stretched his body. Recently, he hadn't been eating or sleeping well. It had been a long time since he had such a comfortable sleep. He opened the door and saw a waiter walking up with a tray. Li Yi's face lit up. He patted him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, brother, it's you again. I'm really sorry about last night. Come, put the things in." 15 minutes later, the waiter walked out of the room. Downstairs, the man with the surname Fong walked out of the room. Immediately, a man in blue came up to him and said, "Envoy, everything is ready. When do we start?" "Tonight at midnight." The man with the surname Fong said in a low voice and walked upstairs. The waiter brushed past him. The man with the surname Fong suddenly stopped and said, "Stop." He turned his head and looked at the waiter and asked, "Are you a waiter here? Why didn't I see you a few days ago?" The handsome waiter looked at him indifferently. There was no change in his expression. "Raise your head." The man with the surname Fong had a look of doubt on his face. He extended his hand to hold the waiter's chin. His other hand reached out from the side and grabbed the waiter's wrist. Li Yi looked at him with a smile and said, "Brother Fong, this brother can't speak." The waiter glanced at Li Yi and turned to go downstairs. "Stop." A hint of anger appeared on the man with the surname Fong's face. Just as he was about to chase after him, the hand firmly grabbed his wrist. He couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. His expression changed slightly. When he turned his head to look at Li Yi, a strange expression finally appeared on his face. Li Yi loosened his grip. The man with the surname Fong looked at him and said, "I've underestimated you before." After saying that, a hand suddenly reached out and went straight for Li Yi's throat. Bang! After a dull sound, Li Yi took 2 steps back. The young man's body swayed on the spot and an unnatural red flush appeared on his face. Li Yi waved his hand. This guy was indeed powerful. Back at the Heroes Conference, he was able to fight Yang Luqin to a standstill. He was not someone that Li Yi could defeat just by sleeping a few times. Paw! As he waved his sleeve, something flew out from his sleeve and landed on the floor, making a clear sound. The man with the surname Fong instinctively lowered his head to take a look. After being stunned for a moment, his expression changed greatly the next moment. Blue Dragon Envoy. He suddenly raised his head to look at Li Yi and said angrily, "How is this possible?" Thump. The 2 men in blue behind him immediately knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Your subordinates greet the left guardian." The man with the surname Fong took a step forward and picked up the token on the ground. He flipped it over and looked at it. The azure dragon pattern carved on it was vivid and lifelike. He took out another token from his waist. It looked almost exactly the same as this one, but what was carved on it was a white tiger. Azure dragon on the left and white tiger on the right. The azure dragon was the leader, and the white tiger was the support. The left guardian of the holy religion. The left protector whose status was only below that of the empress. He narrowed his eyes, looked at Li Yi, and said coldly, "Where did you get this token? Tell me the truth." Li Yi calmly glanced at him and did not say anything. A trace of anger appeared on the young man's face. He turned to the 2 men in blue behind him and said, "You two, capture him. I'll go ask her ladyship." The 2 men in blue lowered their heads and remained unmoved. The young man with the surname Fong's expression changed. He looked at Li Yi with an even more vicious gaze. However, he did not say anything else. Instead, he walked straight to a door in front of him. After knocking on the door, he pushed it open and walked in. The young man angrily looked at the middle-aged Taoist nun who was sitting cross-legged on the bed and asked, "Auntie, I want an explanation. Why is he the left guardian? Who is he?" Chapter 655. Li Yi stared in astonishment at the man in blue who was kneeling on the ground with a pious expression. The man in blue could be considered as a small executive within the Holy Church, but he actually behaved like a fanatic. He didn't even let the higher-ups off. This brainwashing job was very successful. I understand." Not long after, the young man slowly retreated from the room. He stood at the door and spoke respectfully. When he turned around, he threw the sign back to Li Yi. He glared fiercely at him again, then flicked his sleeves and left. Li Yi held the sign in his hand and looked at it as he walked downstairs. That fellow just now seemed to have taken out a similar sign. On the way here, he had heard from the man in blue that besides the Empress, the Holy Church also had the left and right protectors, 8 purple-robed envoys, and more blue-robed envoys. There were even more yellow-robed envoys, and then there were 100,000 followers. However, all the believers had only seen the right emissary. As for the mysterious left emissary, whose position was second only to the Empress, he had never seen him before. Based on the situation just now, his sign seemed to be worth a bit more than the sign of the young man surnamed Fong, Azure Dragon Envoy. Li Yi thought for a moment. The Azure Dragon on the left and the White Tiger on the right. If he was the Azure Dragon Envoy, then wouldn't the man surnamed Fong be the White? Oh, so shameful. That man surnamed Fong was really shameless. We pay our respects to the left protector. Seeing the sign in Li Yi's hand, the dozen or so people around him all knelt down on the ground. The diners downstairs looked at this scene in astonishment. Their chopsticks fell to the ground. At the door, the young man surnamed Fong stopped in his tracks. He clenched his teeth and punched the wall. Then, he strode out of the inn. In the hall, a steward said to a servant loudly, "Be careful on the road. Remember to buy live fish, fresh ones." The handsome servant nodded slightly. He raised his head and glanced at the steward, then slowly walked out of the inn. Big Brother Lu's words are too biased. Who said that women enjoy leisure? Men fight at the borders while women weave at home. Afternoon, a loud and clear voice came from a wide plaza next to the Ru family inn. The Ru family inn and this brothel had both been moved here a few months ago. The so-called brothel was nothing more than a place to sing operas and listen to books. The stories were old-fashioned, and the plots were boring. Usually, when people were free, they rarely went to the brothel to watch operas and listen to music. However, this brothel subverted their understanding of brothels. There were novel stories, interesting scripts and exquisite performances. Most importantly, the price was low. You could watch it for an hour with just 1 copper coin. Every few days, they would set up a stage outside to perform for the passers-by to watch for free. Therefore, although the brothel had only been here for a short period of time, it had accumulated enough popularity. At this moment, the woman on the stage was singing a new play, Hua Mulan. It was a story about a heroine who joined the army on behalf of her father. It was said that the current Princess Royal was also a heroine who was not inferior to any man. She fought bravely against the people of the Qi Kingdom and helped the Jing Kingdom regain its dignity. The people of Shu Land had long heard of this story. Do you think that Hua Mulan, a woman, can lead an army to war? Who says she can't? Can't women fight? Doesn't your wife beat you up all day? What I mean is, as a woman, won't she be discovered in a place where men eat and sleep? Idiot, if you want to sleep with her every night, what would you say? The passers-by chatted as they watched the show. From time to time, people from the inn would come out and join the crowd. As for those who were self-conscious and did not want to be crowded with ordinary people, they could watch the show through a stage on the second floor of the Ru family inn for just 1 silver coin. The view was clearer and the view was better. If they added another silver coin, they could enjoy the super VIP seats in the front row. They would also be provided with free sunflower seeds, mineral water, and melon seeds at no extra cost. Every free performance at the brothel would last from noon to night. Yong County did not have a curfew, so everyone could watch the show. Gradually, a few people in yellow walked out of the inn. They stood outside the crowd and watched with interest. A man carried a pole and walked over from afar. He shouted, "Herbal tea! Herbal tea! 2 copper coins for your fill." Every time there was a benefit performance at the brothel, there would be hawkers who wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to sell tea and fruits. Their business was much better than usual. It was already early April. From April onwards, summer would begin in Shu Prefecture. Immediately, someone walked out from the crowd and said, "Give me a cup of tea." "All right." The man laughed and immediately scooped up a cup of tea for the man. The man picked it up and drank it in one gulp. He smiled and said, "Delicious. Give me another cup. I've never had such a taste before, hee hee, a family recipe." The man laughed and scooped up another cup. At the edge of the crowd, a few people in yellow turned back and looked. They licked their lips and looked at the stage again. The youth with the surname Fong walked in front with a gloomy expression. Two people in blue and several people in yellow followed behind him. A man in blue stepped forward and said, "Guardian, everyone is ready. We are only waiting for your order. There's no need to wait for me. Once it's midnight, we will act immediately." The youth with the surname Fong said and suddenly stopped. He tilted his head and glanced at them before continuing to walk forward. The people behind him parted ways. The youth with the surname Fong changed his direction and walked towards a deserted alley. Yong County was desolate and not very prosperous. The further the youth with the surname Fong walked, the more remote it became. After about 15 minutes, he reached a dead end. The youth with the surname Fong walked into the alley. Then, he turned around and crossed his arms. He said coldly, "Aren't you tired after following me for so long?" As his voice fell, a figure slowly walked out from behind. The moment he saw the figure, the youth with the surname Fong was startled. He blurted out, "It's you." Then, a cold smile appeared on his face. He said, "I knew there was something wrong with you. I just didn't expect that you would have such guts. You actually dared to follow me alone." The youth with the surname Fong looked at the servant and clapped his hands. A few figures surrounded him from behind. They were the people in blue and yellow. The youth with the surname Fong looked at him and said coldly, "You are in cahoots with that impostor, right?" The handsome manservant didn't answer. His expression was still calm as he slowly walked over. This undisguised disregard caused the expression of the youth with the surname Fong to completely darken. "Take him down." He waved his hand and said coldly, "Take him alive. I want to see what that impostor is plotting." The people in blue and yellow sped up and walked towards the handsome servant. 3 breaths later, the youth with the surname Fong knelt on the ground. A long sword was pressed against his neck. His face was pale and he asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you? What do you want?" Chapter 656. At dusk, the weather turned from scorching hot to sultry. The operas in the inn's brothel also changed from Mulan, Peacock Flies Southeast, Mu Guiying, to Legend of the White Snake and Journey to the West. As the show went on, the number of onlookers around the stage increased instead of decreasing. There were no entertainment activities in the county, and everyone was idle. Who wouldn't like free excitement? It was just that after watching and chatting for a long time, they were very thirsty. Fortunately, there was a stall selling herbal tea to quench their thirst. More and more people walked over and spent 2 copper coins to drink a bowl before turning back to continue watching the show. "Give me 10 people." A man in yellow walked over and threw a handful of copper coins on the table. "Okay, please wait a moment." The man quickly put away the money, opened the 2 buckets, and said, "I've been selling for a day. There's not much left anyway. You can drink as much as you want. After you finish, I can pack up and go back." More than 10 men in yellow and a few men in blue heard this and walked over. As Li Yi was about to walk out of the inn, a man in blue came forward and said awkwardly, "Lord Protector, the Queen said you can't go out." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "I'm just going out to watch the show. I've already prepared a place for you on the 2nd floor of the inn. Please move to where you can see better." There are too many people up there. It's boring. I'll go up and clear the place. Why don't I bring those performers to the protector's room? Li did not know whether he should be happy to have such a conscientious subordinate who was always thinking of his superior, or whether he should kick him to death. Li waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I'm not interested." The man in blue bowed and said, "I'll send the protector back to his room." At this time, a man in yellow suddenly walked in with a panicked expression. When he saw Li, he immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, Left Protector. Why are you so flustered? What's the matter?" The man in blue asked unhappily. The yellow-clothed man panicked and said, "Oh no, the right protector has been captured." The blue-clothed man was startled for a moment before his expression immediately changed. "Quickly go and report to Her Highness." "Lady, someone shot this with an arrow." The yellow-clothed man handed a small pouch to the middle-aged Taoist nun. The middle-aged Taoist nun took the pouch and took out a jade pendant. Li glanced at it and saw that it was the one that the youth surnamed Fong had taken out. Apart from the jade pendant, there was also a piece of paper. On it was written, "If you want to save your protector, come to the small bamboo forest 30 li away in an hour." The yellow-robed man added, "I have already asked. The bamboo forest is 30 miles east of the county town." A blue-clothed man stepped forward and respectfully said, "Lady, the protector's martial arts are unparalleled and there are several blue-clothed envoys by his side. It can be seen that the bandits are very powerful. Why don't you let this subordinate lead a group of people and go? All of you wait here, I will personally go." The middle-aged Taoist nun lightly said, "Prepare the horse." A moment later, the blue-clothed men in the inn looked at each other. The lady and the two purple-clothed envoys had gone to save the protector. They did not know who was so daring to kidnap the protector. However, from the looks of it, the strength of those people could not be underestimated. It was likely that only the lady would be able to deal with them. "Lord Protector, please return to your room to rest." Knowing that the protector of the left had a special identity, the lady told them to keep an eye on her. A blue-clothed man turned around and respectfully said, "Ah." Li yawned and casually pointed at a manservant. He said, "It just so happens that I am also sleepy and want to eat something before I sleep. Little brother, remember to have the kitchen make something delicious and send it up." Along the way, they already knew that the protector of the left had two hobbies, eating and sleeping. Especially the latter, it had already reached an unimaginable level. A blue-clothed man pointed at the manservant and said, "Did you hear that? Immediately go to the kitchen and make a few, thump." Before he could finish his sentence, he felt a pain in his neck. His vision darkened and he fell to the ground. The other blue-clothed man was startled. He was about to move, but before he could make a sound, he fell to the ground. Not far away, someone had already noticed that something was wrong. As he ran over, he shouted, someone come quickly." However, his actions did not receive much response. Outside the door, the man selling herbal tea had already disappeared without a trace. A dozen or so figures were lying on the ground, causing the crowd to panic. "Let's go." Mississippi Lou casually pulled out autumn water from under the table and used its sheath to knock over a few people. She grabbed Li Yi's arm and rushed towards the door. Just as she was about to step out of the inn's door, she suddenly stopped. The middle-aged Taoist nun placed 2 fingers on her shoulder and said, "Alliance Master Lu, long time no see." She originally wanted to lure the tiger away from the mountain to escape, but she did not expect the Taoist nun to play hard to get. She should have already left the county town in a quarter of an hour, but she suddenly appeared at the door. A Grand Master actually used such a shameless sneak attack. Mississippi Lou's acupoints were sealed. She could only speak and could not move. All the previous arrangements were useless under the Taoist nun's absolute strength. Take some people to the small bamboo forest and bring the protector back." The middle-aged Taoist nun ordered. 2 men in purple obeyed and sent people to bring back the dozen or so people who were drugged. They then gathered about 20 people and quickly left the inn. With such an accident and the fact that it was already late, the charity performance outside the inn naturally could not continue. The Taoist nun sat at the table and looked at Mississippi Lu and asked, "Alliance Master Lu followed us all the way from the capital. It must have been difficult, right?" Mississippi Lu glanced at her with a calm expression and did not speak. A hunchbacked old man who was being held down by the man in blue said, "My lord, this really has nothing to do with us. If we don't do as she says, she will bring people to kill my entire family." The old man's face was full of fear. He said with a trembling voice, "This old man has an 80-year-old mother, a son who died young, and an 8-year-old grandson. My lord, please spare my life, please spare my life. My lord, he is the innkeeper of this inn." The man in blue brought the old man over and said. Mississippi Lu glanced at the old man and said, "He is right. This matter has nothing to do with him. If you want to kill me, do as you please. I don't want to involve innocent people. Listen, it really has nothing to do with me, it really has nothing to do with me." The old man seemed to finally realize that the Taoist nun in front of him was the one in charge. He hurriedly stepped forward and bowed, saying, "I was forced to do this. Spare me, spare me. Damn Taoist nun." When the sound of wind breaking could be heard, the expression on the Taoist nun's face changed drastically. It was too late for her to block it. She raised her palm and took a few steps back. She covered her shoulder and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. The hunchbacked old man had already straightened his body. His face twisted and he instantly changed his appearance. "Cough, it's you." The middle-aged Taoist nun coughed lightly and said word by word, "A dignified grandmaster actually resorted to such a shameless sneak attack. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by others if word gets out? You're speaking as if you didn't sneak attack me just now." The old man curled his lips and looked at her. He said with some anger, "Do you know how much suffering I've suffered because of you?" At this point, the old man's expression became even more furious. In the next moment, he rushed toward the Taoist nun. "I'm going to settle this score with you today." If she was at her peak, she would naturally not be afraid of this old man. However, she had been injured by the sneak attack just now and her strength had been damaged. She was no match for him. The Taoist nun's figure flashed and disappeared outside the door. "Where do you think you're going?" After dealing with the Taoist nun, these small fries were naturally easy to deal with. Thinking of the hardships he had suffered along the way, the old man's resentment toward her immediately increased. He immediately followed her out. "How do we unseal her acupoints?" Li looked at Mississippi Lu and asked anxiously. Mississippi Lu shook her head. She used a unique technique. "You can't undo it." "Then what should we do?" Mississippi Lu glanced at him and closed her eyes. After a moment, an abnormal flush appeared on her face. She bit her lip and after her body trembled, she suddenly opened her eyes. She picked up Autumn Water with one hand and grabbed his arm with the other. She said in a low voice, While she's not here, leave quickly." Chapter 657. Hurry up and protect Her Highness. Seeing the old man chasing after the Taoist nun, a man in purple pointed and said anxiously, "You guys, stop the two of them." As soon as he finished speaking, several people fell to the ground at the inn's entrance. Although the handsome manservant's face was pale, he left afterimages of swords wherever he went. The ordinary blue-clothed and yellow-clothed messengers could not withstand his attacks at all. The purple-clothed man's expression was ugly. The holy religion had only left a few people here. Some of them had been taken away by the right emissary, while the rest were scattered around the inn. Among them, the ones in charge of guarding had been knocked out and the rest had gone to rescue Her Highness. There were not many people left. After a moment's hesitation, he quickly turned around and galloped in the direction where Her Highness had disappeared. Comparing the two of them to Her Highness, he immediately made a decision in his heart. "Leader, leave this to us. Hurry up and leave." In the darkness of the night, a man on a horse galloped over. He nimbly flipped over the horse and dismounted. Behind him, there were several figures following closely. "Thanks." Li Yi and second young mistress Lu quickly mounted their horses. They turned around and said to the man, "Be careful, heroes." He tightened his legs around the horse's belly and shook the reins. The two men and the horse quickly disappeared into the night. A few more yellow-clothed figures rushed out of the inn. "What are you going out for?" "Stay and have fun." The man grinned maliciously and went up to them. In an instant, the sound of weapons clashing rang out in the inn. One of the blue-clothed men had extraordinary skills, but the other side had more people. The yellow-clothed men could not help him much. The two groups were in a stalemate and fell into a stalemate. After a while, the man in front estimated that it was about time and shouted, "There's trouble. Brothers, retreat." As soon as he said this, the others no longer continued to fight. They quickly left the inn and ran into the depths of the night. Inside the inn, the blue-clothed man covered his wound with a gloomy expression. A yellow-clothed man came forward and asked anxiously, "Sir, what should we do now?" The blue-clothed man thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "Wait here for the Empress to return." Not long after, another person came forward to report. This subordinate found the shopkeeper tied up in the woodshed in the backyard. There were also a few workers there. After the battle just now, the blue-clothed and yellow-clothed men were all injured. They came to the woodshed and untied the ropes that bound the shopkeeper and his assistants. The man in blue asked in a deep voice, "Do you know the identity of the person who kidnapped you?" The manager of the restaurant was an old man. At this moment, his face was pale. His lips trembled as he said, I don't know." The man in blue turned around with a gloomy face. Just as he was about to speak, he lowered his head and saw a dagger protruding from his chest. He turned his head back with difficulty. "Shio! Shio! Shio!" Several ear-piercing sounds rang out, and the yellow-clothed men behind the blue-clothed man were all shot in between their eyebrows. They fell to the ground in response, and the waiters of the inn put away their crossbows. The old man pulled out the dagger and said in a low voice, "Hurry up and clean up." Not long after, a raging fire was ignited in the inn. People came out of the surrounding shops and houses one after another. When they saw the innkeeper wailing outside, they could not help but widen their eyes. "There's a fire." The street at night suddenly became noisy. At this time, the city gate was not closed. Li Yi shook the reins, and the horse under him sped up. Everything would be easy once they got out of the city. Mississippi Lu did not tell him about the Grand Master Elder. In fact, when he kidnapped the man surnamed Fong, he did not intend to lure the Taoist nun away at all. From the beginning to the end, the old man was the ultimate trump card. Only by seriously injuring or killing the Taoist nun would they have no worries. Otherwise, even if they could escape, they would not be able to go far. After all, this was the King of Shu's territory, and the Taoist nun was a Grand Master expert with countless masters around her. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible to rely on the two of them to return to the capital city safely. And if the Taoist nun really fell for such a shallow trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain, the next thing she would have to do would be to run for thousands of miles with even more difficulty. "Just now, you, don't speak." Before Li Yi could open his mouth, he was interrupted by Mississippi Lu. If she did not want to speak, then so be it. Although he felt a little strange about Mississippi Lu at this moment, it was more important to escape. Everything could wait until they got out of here. What? The protector was kidnapped. Did something happen to Her Highness? What about the robbery of the King of Shu's treasury at midnight tonight? The protector, forget it for now. Follow me to rescue Her Highness. Dozens of black-clothed figures quickly rushed out of a low-rise house. They caught a glimpse of a horse galloping on the street in front of them. At once, a man in blue was startled, and then he shouted, "Stop them!" Hoot! The horse's hooves knocked on the bluestone-paved street, making a crisp sound. Looking at the man in blue and the dozens of figures behind him, Li Yi's face darkened. Mississippi Lu jumped off the horse and brandished her sword. Go! Dozens of black-clothed men swarmed over. Li Yi dismounted from the horse and caught a weapon that Mississippi Lu threw at him. He took a deep breath and leaned in her direction. It's a rebellion, a rebellion. Jiang Zian hurriedly walked on the street, followed by a crowd of black figures. Just now, someone reported to the police late at night that more than 10 people fought in the Ru family inn. It was said that many people died. This was a serious case. He immediately summoned all the bailiffs and bailiffs in the county government, as well as the people nearby. Nearly 100 people rushed to the scene of the crime. It was impossible for him not to be anxious. If there were large-scale civilian casualties tonight, his position as the county lieutenant would be over. Although he wasn't very satisfied with this position, it was better than nothing. Resigning and being dismissed had completely different meanings. Sir, look ahead. Suddenly, the bailiffs at the front stopped, pointed to the front, and said loudly. Jiang Zian raised his head and saw on the street in front of him, dozens of black-clothed men surrounded two figures, and the sound of weapons colliding came from the front. Lawless, really lawless. In broad daylight, in broad daylight, in broad daylight, in front of the dignified county lieutenant, they committed such violence. Jiang Zian's face showed fury. He waved his hand and said, "What are you waiting for? Save them." He retreated to the back of the bailiffs and then ran forward quickly with them. Li Yi's chest rose and fell slightly. He leaned back to back with Mississippi Lu. Around them were dozens of black-clothed men. Many people could only fall to the ground and moan, but there were still many people around them. Mississippi Lu coughed softly. Li Yi looked back and happened to see her wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. "Are you hurt?" His face changed and he asked hurriedly. Mississippi Lu backhanded a person who was close to her and cut him down. She said coldly, "Don't be distracted in a fight of life and death. Have you forgotten what I taught you before?" Li Yi was stunned. He gritted his teeth and held the sword in his hand tightly again. "Catch them alive," the man in blue said coldly, but his face suddenly changed. He turned his head and looked behind him. A flurry of footsteps approached from afar. Nearly 100 bailiffs and bailiffs ran over and surrounded them. Dozens of black-clothed men immediately gathered in a circle and pointed their weapons at them. Mississippi Lu's body swayed, and Li Yi hurriedly held her. "People inside, listen up. You have been surrounded. I'll give you 3 breaths to think about it. Put down your weapons and surrender immediately. Otherwise, I won't be polite." Jiang Zian stood behind a tall and strong bailiff and shouted. Li Yi looked in a certain direction and asked tentatively, "Brother Jiang? Is it Brother Li?" A head popped out from behind the tall and strong bailiff. Jiang Zian's face was full of surprise and joy. He looked at Li Yi and hurriedly said, "Brother Li, what are you doing there? Come out." Immediately, the bailiffs made way for them. Li Yi helped Mississippi Lu out. The man in blue's face changed, but he didn't do anything in the end. "What the hell is going on? Why are they chasing you?" Jiang Zian looked at him and asked in surprise. "It's a long story." Li Yi looked at him and said, "Thank you for saving us, Brother Jiang." It's my pleasure. Jiang Ziyan waved his hand. Black clothes and masked. These people don't look like good people. As the county lieutenant, it's my duty to keep order. Li Yi looked at him and said, it's urgent. I need to leave the city now. Before he finished speaking, Jiang Ziyan took out a token from his waist and handed it to him. He said, the city gate is closed now. Brother Li, take this token and leave the city. They won't stop you. Li Yi looked at the men in black and said, these people. Jiang Ziyan smiled and said, Brother Li, you can leave. Leave these people to me. Li Yi helped Mississippi Lu get on the horse. He looked at him deeply and said, Brother Jiang, I will repay your kindness in the future. He shook the reins and the horse galloped in the direction of the city gate. You and I hit it off at first sight. You're welcome. Jiang Ziyan watched him go away. He looked back at the bailiffs, pointed at the men in black and said coldly, take them all down. Chapter 658. You, don't come near me. I'm the county lieutenant of this county, an official of the imperial court. If you dare to do anything to me, the imperial court will not let you go even if you run to the ends of the earth. Jiang Ziyan's face was pale. Looking at the man in blue walking toward him, he kept retreating. At this moment, nearly 100 government servants and strong men he brought with him were all lying on the ground. Of course, there were not many men in black left. Only a few of them could stand steadily at this moment. Damn it! The man in blue glared at him fiercely, looked back in a certain direction, and said coldly, go after them. A few standing men in black followed behind him and rushed forward. The remaining men in black helped each other to stand up. Those who were lightly injured carried those who were seriously injured, and soon disappeared on the street. Are you all right? Jiang Ziyan hurriedly ran over and asked. After a while, he breathed a sigh of relief. Although these men were a little embarrassed, fortunately, they did not kill them. The most serious injuries were only some superficial wounds. He looked up in the direction of the city gate and murmured, Brother Li should have left the city by now, right? At the same time, the man in blue looked at the closed city gate and the 2 rows of soldiers at the gate. His face was gloomy, and he said unwillingly, retreat. On a path in the forest outside Yong County, Li Yi rode on a horse. He turned around and looked at Mississippi Lu worriedly, asking, how do you feel now? I'm fine. Mississippi Lu bit her lip, shook her head, and fell from the horse. Li Yi's face changed. He hurriedly flew down and caught her. Under the moonlight, her face could not be seen clearly. Li Yi reached out to touch her forehead, and his face changed again. It's so hot. He turned his head and looked around. Apart from the sounds of unknown insects, the forest was quiet. He had just escaped from Yong County. It was a barren mountain and there was not even a place to stay. There was not even a shadow of a person. Where could he find a doctor? I'm really lucky today. That caravan looks a little small, but it's a fat sheep. I didn't expect that there would be people passing by in the middle of the night in the wilderness. I told you, Yong County is my lucky place. A black shadow jumped down from the tree. His shiny head was particularly eye-catching under the dim light of the night. He pointed at the scholar in front of him and said loudly, this road is opened by me, and this tree is planted by me. If you want to pass through, you must pay for the road. Scholar, hurry up and hand over all your valuables. Oh, you even have a horse. Not bad, not bad. Li gently put Mississippi Lu down. 3 breaths later, he held the bald bandit by the neck and asked coldly, where can I find a doctor? Spare my life, great hero. The bald bandit's face was pale as he spoke in a trembling voice. Open your mouth. Li Yi exerted some force in his palm, and the bandit immediately opened his mouth. In the next moment, the bald bandit felt something enter his mouth. His expression changed as he asked, Great hero, what is this? Li Yi let go of his hand and said coldly, half-step epilepsy with a smile. After 24 hours, if there is no antidote, you will laugh non-stop until your whole body festers, your meridians break, and your body explodes to death. Explode to death, thump. The bald bandit's legs weakened, and he knelt on the ground. Li Yi kicked him and said, Now, lead the way. In the dark of the night, an old man covered his chest and jumped down from the city wall that was dozens of feet high. In the end, he didn't manage to kill Taoist Nun. Although his sneak attack at the beginning was successful, it didn't achieve the result he had expected. Taoist Nun's strength was slightly higher than his, and there was also the group of troublesome little ghosts that gathered more and more. In the end, he could only seriously injure her. When he realized that he couldn't take her life today, he took the initiative to give up. Seriously injuring Taoist Nun should be considered as completing the mission, right? The old man took out a cloth bag from his pocket and threw a piece of candy into his mouth. He felt that he had forgotten something. He carefully filtered through the events in his mind. According to the second miss, if Taoist Nun really fell for the trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain, he should immediately leave the city and escape as fast as he could, rushing to the capital day and night. Even if Taoist Nun chased after him, it was still not enough for him to deal with Taoist Nun alone. But with the second miss, he would always be in an invincible position. If that damned Taoist Nun didn't fall for the trick, he would carry out the second plan. He would first seriously injure her, and the small fries would be easily taken care of. Then, he would escort them out of the city. Suddenly, the old man stopped in his tracks and froze on the spot. Damn it! He slapped his forehead and couldn't help but curse. Just now, he was only thinking about killing Taoist Nun to vent his anger, and actually forgot the most important goal. If he couldn't bring them back safely, he wouldn't be able to complete his mission. The old man gritted his teeth and cursed bitterly, that damned Taoist Nun. The county magistrate of Yong County stood in front of the still-burning Ru family inn, his face extremely gloomy. At this time, the innkeeper was describing with tears and snot how those villains fought in the inn, and how they burned down the inn. He was a pitiful old man, and his little property was burned down in one night. How was he going to live in the future? The county magistrate asked in a deep voice, Do you know who did it? I only remember that the leader was a Taoist nun, and her subordinates in yellow and blue. The old man's confession was quickly confirmed by the surrounding neighbors. After all, those people in strange clothes had been in front of them for a day, and it was hard not to notice them. It's them. Jiang Xian came from the side and said loudly, Lord Wu, when I came from the county government just now, I saw dozens of people daring to kill people on the street, and the leader was a man in blue. Fortunately, I arrived in time to avoid a tragedy. The county magistrate nodded and said, The imperial court has sent an official document saying that Li Yi, the county earl of Chang'an, was kidnapped by a nun from the capital city, and may have arrived in Shuzhou. So it should be Taoist nun. Jiang Xian was stunned and asked, Li Yi was kidnapped. When did this happen? About a month ago. The county magistrate said, The imperial court asked us to rescue them immediately once we find their traces. His Highness, the King of Shu, has just ordered us to report to him immediately if there is any news. Jiang Xian seemed to have not recovered from the news. After a while, a strange expression appeared on his face, and he murmured, Li Yi, I didn't expect that you would have such a day. After a while, he seemed to think of something, and his face changed. He asked the shopkeeper, What does the Taoist nun look like? Who else is with her? About 40 years old, and there is a young man who always wears a white robe beside her. The shopkeeper immediately told the truth. Jiang Xian immediately asked, Is his surname Fong? Yes. The young man surnamed Li called him her brother Fong, the shopkeeper said immediately. Jiang Xian continued to ask, is the young man surnamed Li Xian? The old man shook his head and said, I don't know about this. Jiang Xian's breathing became a little rapid, and he asked, think about it again. Who were they with when they came? A shop assistant came up and said, I remember that the young man surnamed Fong has been here for a long time. Yesterday, in addition to the Taoist nun and those strange people, there was another young man, but what? Jiang Xian asked impatiently. But the young man's appearance. The shop assistant thought for a while, shook his head and said, maybe the first day was at night, and I saw wrongly. I always felt that the young man looked a little different on the second day. Jiang Xian stood there in a daze, and his face was blank and lifeless. The county magistrate of Yong County looked at him and asked in confusion, Lord Jiang, what's wrong? Nothing. Jiang Xian shook his head and said, Lord Wu, I just fought with the bandits and consumed too much energy. Now I want to be alone, so I'll leave this place to you. After saying that, Jiang Xian turned around and left, his back lonely and bleak. The county magistrate of Yong County watched him leave, his face full of shock. The cold moonlight shone on Suzhou, on Yong County, and on a dried-up well in a courtyard that had been abandoned for a long time. Is there anyone? The man surnamed Fong was lying at the bottom of the well with a swollen face. He looked up at the mouth of the well and said weakly. Beside him, a few people in blue and yellow, who had either broken arms or legs, looked up at the sky and spoke in a hoarse voice. Is there anyone? Save us, goddess, save us. Chapter 659. Yong County was the border of the Jing Kingdom, facing the Qi Kingdom across the river. There were many mountains around it, and most of the villages were built on the mountains. The location was remote, and the people were poor. There were many bandits in the mountains. Not only did the bandits often go down the mountains to harm the villagers, but they also targeted the merchants who traveled between the Jing and Qi Kingdom. The Black Wind Stronghold used to be a stronghold for a small group of bandits. The name of the stronghold was Domineering, but it was actually just a few small houses in the mountains. The number of bandits was less than 20. A few months ago, they were blind enough to target a small caravan. They didn't expect the caravan to hire powerful guards. The 20 bandits were all killed, and their heads were hung on a tree. From then on, the Black Wind Stronghold only had a few small houses. After being abandoned for a few months, the stronghold had a new owner at noon today. At this time, in a clean room, the bald bandit said with a trembling voice, Hero, we don't have a doctor here. Li Yi touched Mississippi Lou's forehead and looked at him. Do you have wine? I just moved here today, I don't have any. The bald bandit said. Seeing that the hero's face darkened, he immediately nodded his head like a chick pecking rice. Yes, there should be. I robbed a small caravan today, they definitely have some wine. I'll go get it immediately. After leaving the room and closing the door gently, the bald bandit let out a long sigh of relief. This young man looked like a gentleman, but when he fought, how could he be so terrifying? A bandit came up and said in a low voice, Boss, he's only one person, and he's a burden. Why don't we charge in and kill him with one strike each? The bald bandit smacked his head and scolded, Shut up. Where are the people from the afternoon locked up? Take me there quickly. It was easy to rush in, and it was also easy for each of them to chop down. However, it was hard to say if they could defeat the young man together. Moreover, if they really killed him, who would cure the poison of the half-step upside down with a smile? If they didn't have the antidote after 24 hours, he would laugh non-stop, his whole body festering, his meridians broken, and his body exploding, in the innermost room. The bandit knew that his boss was in a bad mood and didn't dare to provoke him again. He immediately said, Boss, I'll take you there. Boo-hoo. Miss, are we going to die? In a dilapidated room, there was a soft sobbing sound. After a moment of silence, a young woman's voice rang out, "It's all my fault. If I hadn't been so stubborn, I wouldn't have been caught by these bandits." In the corner, a big man's face turned red as he said, "Miss, please don't say that. It's all my fault, I didn't protect you all." That surnamed by was plotting against Miss. It was right for Miss not to be with him. "If I had been more vigilant, I wouldn't have." The female voice paused for a moment, then said, "It doesn't matter. At that time, you won't be able to do anything." Another young man said regretfully, "If they hadn't captured Miss, we wouldn't have been afraid of them." An old voice sighed and said, "Be quiet, don't let them hear us. Right now, we should be thinking about how to escape." Bang! Just as the old man finished speaking, the door was suddenly pushed open and a bald man walked in from outside. After seeing the bald man in the light of the lamp, the sobbing servant girl immediately stopped crying and shrank back, her eyes filled with fear. Seeing these people enter, the beautiful woman's expression also changed slightly. The veins on the big man's forehead bulged and he said loudly, "If you have any problems, come at me, don't hurt my miss." The bald bandit glanced at him and asked, "Do you have wine?" The big man was stunned. Thinking that not only did this bald man want to sully the miss, but he also wanted wine to liven things up, he immediately widened his eyes and said angrily, "If you want to kill me, do as you please. Don't you dare sully my miss. Are you King crazy?" The bald bandit kicked the big man and said angrily, "I asked you if you have wine, what does that have to do with your miss?" The big man was stunned. "Didn't you want my miss to suppress the stronghold?" The bald bandit kicked him again and said, "Are you trying to kill me? Less nonsense, tell me, do you have wine?" This time, he ran away from home because he couldn't stand being looked down upon at home. He swore that he wouldn't go back until he made a name for himself. When the time came, that tigress would look at him in a different light. Before he made a name for himself, he already had a wife to suppress the stronghold. Wouldn't he be beaten to death by that tigress? "The wine is in the second carriage," the beautiful woman said. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" The bald bandit glanced at her and walked out the door. When he reached the door, he said again, "Don't think I didn't hear you just now. Don't think about running away. Send a letter home and pay 1,000, at least 800 taels of ransom, and I will let you go. Don't worry, before that, I won't touch a single hair of yours." Hearing the door slam, the woman raised her head, a complicated expression on her face. 800 taels, did he know how much the goods in those 2 carriages were worth? Just that piece of glazed ware alone was more than 10 times that price. All the goods added together, it would be at least 100 times that number. The big man twisted his body and said softly, "Miss, don't worry, we will be able to leave very soon." He moved his wrist, a hint of sharpness faintly appearing in his palm. "Hero, the wine is here." The bald bandit fawningly placed a jar of wine and 2 empty bowls on the table. Lee lowered his head to look at the porcelain bowls. The bald bandit immediately said, "I just bought it, it's clean. Get out. Hero, the antidote, open your mouth." The bald bandit was overjoyed and immediately opened his mouth. Lee raised his hand and something flew into his mouth. "Did you swallow it?" Lee looked at him and asked. "Yes, I swallowed it, thank you, hero." The bald bandit's face was full of joy. When he turned around, a sneer appeared on his face. He walked to the door and turned back to ask, "Hero, was that the antidote just now?" "No." The bald bandit's expression was startled. Lee said lightly, "You ate 2 half-step with a smile, now you only have 12 hours left. Still not leaving?" Lee looked back at him and asked, "Do you want another one?" As soon as he finished speaking, the bald bandit disappeared from the house and closed the door. Li Yi put the jar of wine and the empty bowls on the bed, and then put down the curtain beside the bed. He took an empty bowl and filled it with half a bowl of wine. After smelling it, he tore off a piece of his sleeve and dipped it in the wine. He lifted Mississippi Lu's hand and carefully wiped her palm. She was having a fever now, and there was no antipyretic, so she could only use the primitive method of physical cooling. After wiping her palms, he rolled up her sleeves and wiped her arms, then her forehead, and her neck. The evaporation of alcohol would take away a lot of heat. Her current situation was more serious than Ruoqing's at that time. Li Yi took off her shoes and socks, and wiped her feet and calves. If he wanted the effect to be good, he had to wipe her chest and armpits. However, the person in front of him was Mississippi Lu, not Rui, so he still had to pay attention to some boundaries. Li Yi sat by the bed and reached out to touch her forehead. It was still a little hot. The servant's clothes were very tight, and the buttons were buttoned all the way to the neck, which was not good for heat dissipation. Li Yi frowned and unbuttoned her neck and chest. When he unbuttoned the last button, he suddenly seemed to feel something. He raised his head and met Mississippi Lu's clear eyes. The atmosphere was momentarily heavy. "You have a fever." Li Yi looked at her, waved the strip of cloth in his hand, and said, "Wipe it with alcohol, it can reduce the fever." Mississippi Lu raised her wrist and saw that her sleeves were almost down to her shoulders. She also felt a little cold on her calves and feet. She looked at Li Yi again. Li Yi dipped the strip of cloth in the wine and gently wiped it on her forehead again. He said, "The situation is special now, so let's not bother about these things. Besides, there is an old saying that the sister-in-laws, of what?" She looked at Li Yi with bright eyes and asked. Chapter 660. Sister-in-laws. A hint of anger appeared on Li Yi's face. He patted her forehead and said, "Why are you asking so many questions? What you need now is a good rest." Mississippi Lu didn't react at all. After looking at him, she slowly closed her eyes. Li Yi's face began to show real worry. It seemed that she was really badly injured. Otherwise, she would definitely return that blow 10 times over. He put the cloth aside and asked worriedly, "How are your injuries?" "I won't die." After a long time, her faint voice was heard. She had forcefully used her true qi to open the acupoint sealed by Taoist nun. This time, she was indeed seriously injured. In a short period of time, she probably couldn't fight with anyone again. It would take at least a few months to recuperate. After a while, she opened her eyes and asked, "Where are we?" Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about that. I'll take you to see a doctor tomorrow." Mississippi Lu shook her head and said, "No need. We'll leave Shuzhou immediately. Otherwise, Taoist nun will find us sooner or later." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Let's see a doctor first." Outside the door, a few bandits squatted in the yard. The bald bandit turned his head to look at the room and let out a long sigh. "There are still 10 hours left. Big brother, it's all our fault. We shouldn't have persuaded you." Beside him, a bandit's face was full of regret. He said, "If I had known this day would come, I would have let you go back and turn over a new leaf 2 days ago. We're all brothers. It's not your fault." The bald bandit patted him on the shoulder and said, "Besides, if I don't make a name for myself, I won't have the face to go back. Big brother, when we get the antidote, let's go back and apologize to sister-in-law, and this matter will be over." A man sighed and said, "A day together as husband and wife means endless love. Sister-in-law won't make things difficult for you. I won't go back." The bald bandit gritted his teeth and said, "I won't go back if I don't make a name for myself. Let's see what that tigress has to say when I become the greatest bandit of this generation." Everyone couldn't help but sigh. It wasn't easy to become the greatest bandit of this generation, and it was even harder to conquer that tigress. Not good, big brother, be careful. They escaped. A voice suddenly rang out from behind them. They immediately stood up and saw a brother running out from one of the rooms. Behind him, a man rushed out of the room, followed by several figures. Get your weapons. The bald bandit's expression changed. The people around him reacted and immediately ran in that direction. Miss, you guys leave first. Leave this to us. The man turned his head and shouted. He then grinned maliciously at the two bandits. Damn it, I fell for your trap today. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Two of the bandits were knocked to the ground in a single exchange, and the few people behind him were also engaged in battle with the bandits who were charging over. The young servant girl and the beautiful woman ran out of the room and ran outside under the escort of the two men. Although the burly man's side had fewer people, they were slightly stronger. Just the burly man alone was enough to take on 3 bandits at once. The few of them were actually able to stall all the bandits, making it impossible for them to chase after the woman. Everything happened too suddenly. Both sides didn't have any weapons. At this moment, it was all close combat, and the fight was quite intense. At this moment, a young man walked out of a room while supporting another person. The large man turned his head to look and was slightly startled. He immediately said loudly, "Scholar, what are you waiting for? We'll stop these bandits. You should hurry up and escape." The scholar seemed to be frightened by the situation in front of him. He stared blankly at the scene in front of him and didn't move at all. "Dalong, you go take them away." Seeing the scholar's appearance, a trace of helplessness appeared on the burly man's face. Immediately, a young man knocked down a bandit and quickly ran over. "Hurry up and leave." The young man seemed to have finally returned to his senses. He carried his companion horizontally and quickly followed the young man away. "He's quite strong, but too timid." Seeing this, the burly man said in a low voice and focused even more on dealing with the bald bandit in front of him. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the bald bandit had suddenly become desperate. Seeing that the young man had left, the bald bandit roared angrily. He was both shocked and afraid. He really wanted to rush over and ask for the antidote back, but the burly man blocked him. His eyes suddenly widened, and with an angry roar, he pounced over again. The burly man's expression changed. At this moment, the bald bandit gave him a great deal of pressure. A quarter of an hour later. The burly man panted heavily, his whole body drenched in sweat. He looked at the bald bandit and said, "Isn't it just 1,000 taels of silver? We'll give it to you, all right. Get lost." The bald bandit spoke in a hoarse voice, then charged forward once more. Silver was important, but his life was even more important. Without the antidote, he would explode and die in 10 hours. "Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" the burly man said angrily. He gathered his remaining strength and punched out. It was already past midnight. Under the moonlight, 2 carriages sped along the mountain road. The young girl placed her hand on her chest and timidly asked, "Miss, do you think they'll be able to catch up?" The beautiful woman gritted her teeth and didn't speak. She glanced behind her and said, "Wait for them up ahead after we leave the forest. There's a village up ahead. Those bandits probably won't dare to follow us." Not long after, in front of a village, a man quickly ran into the village. Soon, there were many lights in the village, and the woman's expression finally relaxed. The young maid looked at the young man who came down from the other carriage and asked doubtfully, "Were you also kidnapped by those bandits?" "Yes." Lee nodded and said, "Thank you very much." "You're welcome." The maidservant smiled sweetly. Now that they were out of danger, her heart was finally at ease. An old man walked over from the side and looked at Li Yi. He asked, "Is the young lady in the carriage injured?" The maid was stunned and asked, "Grandpa Lin, there's only a young master in the carriage. Where did the young lady come from?" The old man smiled and patted her head lovingly. He didn't say anything. Li Yi suddenly looked at the old man and asked, "Do you know medicine?" The young girl nodded quickly and said, "Of course. Grandpa Lin was the one who cured me when I caught a cold last time. Usually, if someone falls sick at home, there's no need to call for a doctor." After a while, the young maid looked behind her and turned to look at the woman. She asked, "Miss, is there really a young lady in the carriage?" The beautiful woman looked in that direction and a trace of doubt appeared on her face. However, it quickly disappeared and she looked in the direction where they came from. Next to the carriage, Li Yi looked at the old man and asked anxiously, "Old man, how is she? This young lady should be a martial artist, right?" The old man stroked his beard and asked. Li Yi nodded. "This young lady's internal organs have suffered serious injuries. It seems that she took a wrong turn when she was cultivating." The old man looked at him and said, "Although it is good to practice martial arts, one should not be too hasty. Fortunately, this young lady's physique is extraordinary. Otherwise, she would have lost her life long ago. Even so, if she wants to recover, she will need to rest for at least half a year." Li Yi was slightly relieved. It was fine as long as her life was not in danger. At this moment, he could roughly guess when she was injured. He looked back and could only shake his head helplessly. At a certain time, the young maid suddenly shouted, "They're back." The man was at the front with a few people behind him. They were jogging towards the carriage. "How are you? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." The man panted and shook his head. He said, that bald man, he's a madman. He doesn't care about his life. He chased after us with all his might. In the end, I knocked him out and we took the opportunity to retreat. The bandits didn't catch up. Chapter 661. What? You're saying that Taoist nun is the one who took Li Yi away from the capital? The king of Shu stood up abruptly from his chair and asked, "Where is he now?" "I haven't seen Uncle Li. He should be hidden by them." Jiang Xian said guiltily, "I'm incompetent and failed to save Uncle Li from those people." "Where's Taoist nun?" the king of Shu asked again. "He disappeared last night," Jiang Xian said with his head down. "Find him." The king of Shu slammed the table and said, "Find him for me." A moment later, Jiang Xian walked out of the mansion of the king of Shu and let out a long sigh of relief. Although almost a night had passed, the feeling in his heart was still a little complicated. He waved his hand and said to a constable beside him, "Pass down my order. All government runners and civilians are to search every village. Report to me immediately if you find any news of those people." At this time, in a village not far from Yong County, dozens of figures were waiting respectfully outside a courtyard. In the courtyard, the man in purple bowed and said, "Lady, I've sent people to check the small bamboo forest mentioned by that man, but they didn't find the protector." The middle-aged Taoist nun leaned against the headboard, her hair slightly messy and her face pale. She waved her hand and said, "Continue to search in the city. In addition, send more people to look for those two people." "Yes." The man in purple answered and walked out of the door. Not long after, the dozens of people in blue and yellow outside changed their clothes and dispersed. In a dry well in Yong County, the man surnamed Fong was pale. His acupoints had been sealed, so he couldn't run his genuine qi. He looked up at the sky at the mouth of the well with despair on his face. Outside Yong County, deep in a mountain forest, the bald man leaned against a tree with a dull expression. His eyes were lifeless, and he also looked up at the sky. "How much time do I have?" After an unknown period of time, his lips moved with difficulty. A bandit beside him looked at the sky and sighed, saying, "Less than an hour." The bald man put his hands behind his head and said, "After today, you can go back. Big brother." The bald man waved his hand and said, "Go back and farm well. Although the days are a little hard, you won't starve to death. It's better than hanging your head on a belt." Half-step mental disorder with a smile. "If I can't help but laugh later, give me a quick death. Then dig a hole and bury me. Don't pile up dirt, don't erect a monument, don't do anything." A bitter smile appeared on the bald man's face. "Bleeding from all 7 apertures and exploding to death. It's too unsightly." A bandit gritted his teeth and stood up, saying, "Big brother, I'll go get the antidote." "It's too late." The bald bandit waved his hand and said, "Go back and help me pass a message to your sister-in-law. Tell her that I don't regret marrying her in this life. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have advised Big Brother." One of the bandits gritted his teeth, stood up, and slashed the tree with his sword. "The one in front, do you see a young man with a girl?" A voice came from behind. The bandit impatiently waved his hand and said, "Scram, scram, scram. I'm annoyed. What are you yelling for? I'll kill you if you yell again." Thump. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a pain in the crook of his leg. His legs gave way and he knelt on the ground. "What did you just say?" An old man with messy hair walked up from behind and looked at him. The eyes of the bandits suddenly widened and they couldn't help but shiver. Senior. The fear in their hearts increased to the extreme. Thinking of the terrifying scene from a few days ago, a few of them immediately knelt on the ground. "It's you guys again." The old man's face also revealed a surprised expression. He remembered that the bald man was the leader of the group. He walked over and asked, "Hey, have you seen a young man with a beautiful girl with a young man?" The bald man leaned against the tree with an emotionless expression. He glanced at the old man and didn't answer. The old man narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "I'm asking you a question." The bald man glanced at him again. His eyes were indifferent and didn't contain any emotion. The old man grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up against the tree trunk. He said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" The bald man looked at him coldly and said, "Don't talk nonsense. If you want to kill me, then kill me. Don't be so wishy-washy like a woman." The cold expression on the old man's face disappeared and he looked at him in surprise. "You want to die?" The bald man said indifferently, "In any case, the poison will take effect in an hour. Just kill me and give me a quick death." The old man grabbed his wrist and felt it. He said in surprise, "You're not poisoned," the big man said coldly, "Oomph. That laughing half-step madness is a rare poison in the world. If there's no antidote, I'll laugh non-stop in an hour. My whole body will fester, my meridians will break, and I'll explode and die." The old man was even more surprised. He said, "I've roamed the martial world for decades, but I've never heard of such a strange poison." "That's because you're ignorant." The bald man looked at him and said, "If you want to kill me, then kill me. Stop talking nonsense. If you don't kill me, I'll find someone else to kill me." The old man didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed and said, "I'm called Monster Sue in the martial world. I didn't expect you to be even weirder than me. You're actually begging someone to kill you, Big Brother, Big Brother." At this time, a figure ran out from a house not far away. He waved the paper in his hand and said happily, "Big Brother, I found this in the room. That person said that it wasn't poison. It was all a lie." "Really?" The big man was shocked. He took the paper from his hand. After looking at it, he gave it to another person beside him and said, "Virgu, you've also studied for 2 years. Look at what's written here." That person hurriedly looked at the paper and slapped his thigh. He said, "Big brother, it's true." That person left a letter saying that it wasn't poison. The big man's face revealed an ecstatic expression. He murmured, "So, I don't have to die." "No, no, no." The old man indifferently glanced at him and shook his head. "I've thought about it seriously just now. Since you want to die, why don't I fulfill your wish? In the future, it will be a story that I'm happy to help others." The smile on the bald man's face froze. Plop. He knelt on the ground and hugged the old man's thigh. With tears and snot, he said, "Senior, I was wrong. I don't want to die. Don't you want to find someone? Let's talk about finding someone. You really don't want to reconsider?" The old man looked at him and said, "When others asked me to help, the reward was 100,000 taels of silver. I'm in a good mood today, so I won't take a penny. You've made a big profit." "No, I won't." The bald man shook his head and said, "Senior, you shouldn't help with less than 100,000 taels of silver. I can't let you suffer a loss." The old man took out a portrait from his chest and asked, "Tell me, have you seen this person?" "No." The big man shook his head. Although the person in the portrait gave him a very familiar feeling, he had indeed never seen him before. The old man frowned and seemed to have thought of something. He said, "Think about it again. That person is about this tall, and there should be a girl beside him. No, the young man dressed like an inn's manservant. He should be carrying a sword with him." The bald bandit was stunned for a moment before he nodded and said, "I think I've seen him before. 10 hours ago, they went down this path." The bald bandit had a flattering expression on his face as he pointed to a mountain path. "That's right." The sloppy old man nodded and took out an item from his chest. He threw it to the bandit. "This is for you." The bald man watched as the old man threw a milky white square object into his mouth. He looked at the exact same object in his hand and also put it in his mouth. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly widened. This taste. Chapter 662. Have a safe journey, Senior. On the mountain path, a dozen or so bandits stood in a neat row, bowing as they watched the sloppy old man leave. Only when his figure had completely disappeared did a bandit turn around and look at the bald man, saying, "Big brother, let's go back. We're not cut out to be bandits." The other bandits all agreed. Thinking back to the days they had spent as bandits, they hadn't even made a single deal and had almost lost their lives. Just thinking about it made them feel disheartened. The bald bandit patted him on the shoulder and said meaningfully, "Ergo, don't be discouraged when you encounter problems. Don't be afraid of failure. Since ancient times, which one of those who achieved great things has never experienced setbacks and tribulations?" The young bandit opened his mouth. "Big brother, I've decided." The bald bandit stood at the front of the mountain path and looked at the distant mountains. He pointed in a certain direction and said, "As a bandit, I won't be satisfied if I don't go there." He turned around to look at the crowd and said, "If you want to go back, then go back. Go back and live well. That's fine. We pledge our lives to follow Big Brother." A bandit half knelt on the ground and said loudly, "We pledge our lives to follow Big Brother. We pledge our lives to follow Big Brother." The dozen or so figures all knelt down, their voices resounding through the mountain path in unison. "You're a scholar. Why aren't you studying at home? What are you doing here in the wilderness?" Li Yi said with a laugh as he leaned against the carriage. The man rode beside him. "Reading 10,000 books is not as good as traveling 10,000 miles." Li Yi smiled and said, "It's always good to travel more." "Ha, you're a scholar after all. You speak exactly the same as my young miss." The man scratched his head and said, "But, it's the first time I've seen someone who can talk about eloping with a girl in such a reasonable way." Li looked at the slowly moving caravan and did not reply this time. He had already learned the identity of these people through a few short conversations along the way. This was a caravan traveling between the Qi Kingdom and the Jing Kingdom. Although the Qi Kingdom and the Jing Kingdom were enemies, this did not affect the merchants much. They would take the goods of their own country to another country to sell, and then buy the scarce goods of their own country from the other country. Going back and forth, they could earn a lot of money. However, the distance between the two countries was long and there were countless dangers. Therefore, most of the caravans traveled in groups or attached themselves to some powerful large caravans. There were very few caravans that dared to travel alone with only a dozen people. A team led by a weak woman was even rarer. The carriage he was in was originally used to carry goods. Fortunately, there weren't many goods, so Mississippi Lu could rest inside. At this moment, the carriage was far away from Shuzhou. Mississippi Lu's current condition was not suitable for her to travel. When they arrived at the next state capital, she could contact the local brothel. After that, things would be much simpler. The man left for a while and came back with the horse. He asked, "My miss asked me to come and ask you where you are going. When we arrive at the next place where we can rest, let us down. Sorry for the trouble." "Ah, it's a small matter, a small matter." The man waved his hand and said, "Then I'll go and tell the Mississippi." Li nodded. He lifted the curtain and looked inside. Mississippi Lu looked at him. "You're awake." Mississippi Lu nodded. "Then I'll sleep for a while. Call me if there's anything." He was already very tired after fighting with those men in black last night and rushing all the way here. He leaned against the carriage and lost consciousness the next moment. Mississippi Lu put autumn water aside. Just as Li was about to slide down, she moved her body to the side. She looked down at Li, who was still frowning in his sleep. After a long time, she looked away and let out a long breath. Li was woken up by a bump. He rubbed his forehead that had bumped into the carriage. He turned his head to look and suddenly sat up. He blurted out, "Rui." The man lifted the curtain and said, "You're talking about that girl. The miss has invited her to the carriage in front." Li rubbed his forehead again and asked, "Where are we now?" "You've only slept for less than an hour." The burly man said, "Look, that's the ferry in front. You should be from Jing country, right? When you reach the ferry, turn left and you'll reach Qin County, and turn right and you'll reach Yong County. It's closer to Qin County." Elder Lin said that this lady can't travel. "I'll help you hire a carriage." Li was stunned for a moment as he listened to the burly man's incessant chatter. "Isn't this the carriage to the Jing Kingdom?" "No." The man shook his head and said, "We've just returned from the Jing Kingdom. After this ferry, we'll reach the Daqi Kingdom." Li jumped down from the carriage and rubbed his head. He had actually taken the wrong carriage. He definitely couldn't go to Yong County. The king of Shu and the Taoist nun must be looking for them. Qin County. Qin County was just next to Yong County. With the friendship between him and the king of Shu, he would probably turn the entire Shu province upside down. Forget it, he should go to Qin County first. With the cover of the brothel there, it should be safer. There were many boats and carriages at the ferry. The guards were moving the goods from the carriages in front of them onto the boats. A few steps ahead, the woman was talking to Mississippi Lu. "Thank you for last night." Li walked over and cupped his hands towards the beautiful woman. The woman nodded slightly and said, "It was just a coincidence." "You're welcome." Li looked at Mississippi Lu and said, "We have to go." The woman turned around and said to the man and the others, "We should also get on the boat." "Hey, you guys, I'm talking to you guys." "Wait a minute, have you seen these two people?" A voice came from behind. Li turned around and saw a group of soldiers stopping the passing carriages. The leader of the soldiers opened the curtains and carefully compared the few people with the portraits in his hand. Then, he waved his hand and said, "All right, you guys can go." Then, he turned around and pointed again, saying, "That carriage over there, stop." Ahem. Li Yi turned around and looked at the woman. He said, "Miss, I have a presumptuous request." The woman named Lin Wanru was startled. She looked at the young man in front of her and then looked at the woman in men's clothing. A look of understanding appeared on her face. After a while, she nodded slightly. "All right. The few of you, guard here. Check every car and every person that passes by carefully." A young general stood at the ferry and said to dozens of soldiers, "This is the order of His Highness, the King of Shu. If you find out, His Highness will greatly reward you." Li Yi stood at the bow of the boat and looked at the blurred ferry. The man's laughter came from the side. "Ha, I've said it before. If you want to go, go far away. It's not good to be caught doing this kind of thing. However, you guys are already like this. It doesn't matter where you are. Go to a place where no one knows you and live a good life. That's better than anything else." The man patted him on the shoulder and said, "You guys have no place to go for now. You can go to our place first. It's not far from here anyway. You're a scholar with a weak body, but you seem to be quite strong." Chapter 663. Useless, all of you are useless. It's been 3 days and we haven't even found a shadow. What use do I have for you? In the King of Shu's mansion, the angry King of Shu flipped the table again. The local officials in Shu all lowered their heads and kept quiet out of fear. In all the counties of Shu, the bailiffs, civilians, and even the county lieutenant personally led people to patrol. However, not only the Taoist nun and the mayor of Chang'an, they didn't even see the shadows of those men in blue and yellow. Looking for 2 people in such a big place like Shu was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Moreover, it was already the next day when the order was issued. Perhaps they had already escaped from Shu. Where could they find them? Continue to search for them for I. If they are alive, I want to see them. If they are dead, I want to see their bodies. The King of Shu gritted his teeth and said word by word. "Yes, Your Majesty," the group of officials responded one after another and walked out dejectedly. Of course, they had to find them even if it was just for show. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain to the King of Shu. After all, the officials in Shu would have to rely on him in the future. In 3 days, the atmosphere in all the counties of Shu suddenly became tense. Soldiers could be seen patrolling the streets. Even in the remote deserted villages, there were civilians searching non-stop. The patrols were especially strict for unfamiliar foreigners. In a long-abandoned courtyard in Yongzhou City, a hand suddenly stretched out from the edge of the dry well in the courtyard. The young man with the surname Fong climbed out of the dry well with difficulty and lay on the ground weakly. 3 days. For 3 whole days, he didn't even drink water, let alone eat. Even though his sealed acupoints had been unsealed, he couldn't muster much strength at this moment. "Wait, I'll go find a rope," he said while leaning on the mouth of the well. Then, he slowly turned around, pushed open the courtyard door, and staggered out. Not long after, a young man in tattered clothes with a face full of dust stood on the street in a daze. He looked at a noodle stall on the street and couldn't help but gulp. Sigh. The owner of the noodle stall sat on the steps and looked at the crowd on the street in boredom. Then, he looked at the empty noodle stall and let out a long sigh. Paw. The next moment, all his attention was attracted by the ingot of silver on the table. "Give me 10 bowls of noodles." The noodle stall owner could not help but feel a chill run down his spine when he saw the young man glaring at him. 10 bowls? He asked uncertainly. "Cut the crap and hurry up." The owner of the noodle stall shivered when the young man glared at him with a green light in his eyes. He immediately said, all right, please wait a moment, the noodles will be here soon. Sir, your noodles are here. Soon, the stall owner served a bowl of noodles. Seeing that the bowl was empty in just a few breaths' time, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. The youth with the surname Fong looked up and said angrily, what are you waiting for? Another bowl. Oh, right away. The owner of the noodle stall hurriedly moved his hands again. He glanced at the young man and cursed in his heart, you finished the noodles that just came out of the pot in an instant. Are you the reincarnation of a hungry ghost in your previous life? Why didn't you burn yourself to death? Only after the young man had eaten 5 bowls did the boss stop and wipe the sweat from his forehead. At this time, there were already many people surrounding the noodle stall. Is it really that delicious? Someone asked doubtfully. He sat down at the side and said, give me a bowl too. Tui. A moment later, he took a bite and immediately spat it out. He glanced at the young man and cursed, how can you eat such disgusting noodles? I thought it would be very delicious. You must have starved to death in your previous life. He threw 2 copper coins on the table and was about to leave when a voice rang out from behind him. Hey, you haven't finished your noodles. The man turned around and looked at the young man. He sneered, I don't want to eat anymore. Why do you care? The young man glanced at him and stood up from his seat. Eat, I'll eat now. The man with a swollen face sat obediently in his seat and finished his bowl of noodles. He didn't even leave a single mouthful of soup. Under the coercion of the young man's gaze, he even refilled his bowl. Only then did he ask in a trembling voice, Is this enough? Scram! The young man waved his hand impatiently. He looked at the boss and said, continue cooking. About an hour later, the boss looked at the piles of bowls beside him in astonishment. He was worried that he couldn't keep up with the speed, so he added extra portions for each bowl. The young man ate 10 bowls just like that. In the end, he even bought dozens of buns from a nearby bun stall before he swaggered off. With such an appetite, he wasn't a human at all. He was a monster. The Qi Kingdom was the most powerful country in this land. This was an undeniable fact. Even though they had lost to the Jing Kingdom in an important battle and lost 2 of their cities, the ambassador of the Qi Kingdom did not gain any advantage in the competition with the Jing Kingdom. However, the Qi Kingdom's strength was far superior to other countries in terms of population, economy, and military. The Feng province was not close to the capital of the Qi Kingdom. It could even be said to be remote. The Jing Kingdom's territory was 3 days' drive to the south. However, although the Feng province was remote, it was not poor. Even in the entire Qi Kingdom, it could be considered one of the richest provinces. At this moment, 2 carriages were slowly entering the city gate of the Feng province. The man was riding on the horse. He looked back and said, Li brothers, we're just ahead. When we get home, I'll arrange for you to stay in the guest room first. After a few days, I'll find a place for you to settle down. The man smiled and said, you're a scholar. If you don't mind, you can work as an accountant for our family. Although the salary isn't much, it's enough for the 2 of you to live in the future. Li Yi cupped his hands in obeisance and said, thank you, Brother Lin. The man waved his hand and said, ah, you're welcome. Li Yi smiled at him. This man, whom he had only known for 4 days, was very warm-hearted. Perhaps it was because they had gone through thick and thin together that he took good care of them along the way. In the eyes of the man in front of him and all the people accompanying him, he and Mississippi Lu were probably a young couple who eloped. Li Yi did not explain to them what they knew. This way, it would save him a lot of trouble. Mississippi Lu's injury couldn't be healed in a short time. She needed to recuperate in peace. It was not suitable for her to travel. He made the decision to settle down here temporarily after weighing the pros and cons. Although he didn't want to come to the Qi Kingdom, he was forced to do so under the circumstances a few days ago. Fortunately, this place was not far from Shuzhou. It would only take him 3 days to get there by carriage. What he needed to do now was to send a letter back to Yong County as soon as possible. The news from the brothel must be on its way. When it reached the capital, Rui and the others would make arrangements. This round trip would take at least 2 or 3 months. During this period, it was a good choice to recuperate in a place that neither the king of Shu nor the Taoist nun could think of. In the past few days, Li Yi had a general understanding of the situation of the Lin family, he mentioned. In this city, the Lin family could only be regarded as a small business. They ran several jewelry shops and occasionally did some international business. The girl named Lin Wanru seemed to be the current manager of the family business. The fact that the Lin family could hand over all the family business to such a young girl showed that she should have extraordinary ability. But unexpectedly, the girl looked soft and weak. She didn't look like a person with any means. When the carriage reached a certain place, the big man pointed and said, "That's the family's shop in front. There's a small courtyard next to the shop. Sometimes, when the shop is busy, the young lady will stay there. The young lady just said that she will have the place cleaned up in the next 2 days. You can stay there temporarily until there are other arrangements in the future." After entering Feng State City, it took less than a quarter of an hour for the Lin family to arrive. The carriage drove in from a side door. Li Yi supported Mississippi Lu. The man led them to a wing and said, "You can live here for the next 2 days. If you need anything, let me know. When the yard is cleaned up in 2 days, you can move there." Li Yi walked into the room. After looking around, he turned around and asked in surprise, "Only this room? Is there a problem?" The man nodded and asked doubtfully. Li Yi was stunned. He shook his head and said, "No. Remember to call me if there is anything." When the man walked to the door, he turned back and said. After his figure disappeared, Li Yi supported Mississippi Lu to sit on the bed and said, "It's urgent. Let's make do for 2 days." Chapter 664. The Lin family, Feng Province, Qi Kingdom. In a small courtyard, Li Yi squatted on the ground and fanned the fire gently. Mississippi Lu's medicine was simmering on the fire. The old man with the surname Lin was the doctor of the Lin family. After returning to the Lin mansion, he quickly sent someone to deliver some medicine. "Li brothers, which part of the Jing Kingdom are you from?" The big man squatted on the side and chatted with Li Yi. He suddenly asked. "Qing and Prefecture." Li Yi replied casually. "Qing and Prefecture? That's so far away." The big man showed a hint of surprise and said, "This time, you've almost passed through the whole Jing Kingdom. It's quite far." Li Yi added more firewood and asked, "Brother Lin, have you been to Qing and Prefecture?" The big man nodded and said, "About half a year ago, I went once with Mississippi. There's a Rui tavern in Qing and Prefecture. The wine there is very strong, and the brothel there. I have to say, the drama in the Jing Kingdom is much better than in the Qi Kingdom. Brother Lin, do you often go to the Jing Kingdom?" Li Yi asked casually. The big man counted with his fingers and said, "I don't go often. I go with Miss twice a year. Including this time, it should be 4 times." Li Yi calculated the time and lowered the intensity of the fire a little. He thought of the seemingly gentle and weak woman and said, "Your family's young mistress is quite capable. Miss is amazing." The big man nodded and said, "The Lin family's business depends on her. Otherwise, those good-for-nothings would have squandered all the family's assets. Mississippi Lu's medicine would be ready in a little more time." Li Yi simply sat there and chatted with the big man. The content was, of course, about the Lin family and the situation in Feng province. The situation of the Lin family was also strange. The second generation of the family was all present, but they handed over the business of the entire family to such a weak girl. Of course, part of the reason was that Miss Lin's father had died early, and the eldest branch was only left with a weak woman and an underage younger brother. More importantly, she did have some kind of extraordinary talent in business. Just from the respect and admiration in this man's words, one could tell a thing or two. As for Feng province, it was located far away from the capital city of the Qi kingdom and could be considered remote. However, its economic strength was not lagging behind at all. It was similar to how Qing and prefecture felt in the Jing kingdom. When he entered the city just now, Li Yi had also observed a little. In terms of prosperity, this place was at least 18 streets away from Shuzhou. Of course, the most important thing to him was another point. The more prosperous and affluent a place was, the less influence the Taoist nun had. Especially in such an important city, their so-called holy religion could not act unscrupulously. Otherwise, if the claim that they had 100,000 followers in the Qi kingdom was not an exaggeration, there might be 800 to thousands of them in Feng province. It would really be a headache. The medicine is ready. Estimating that the time was up, Li Yi extinguished the fire and filtered out the medicine. He tasted a small mouthful and couldn't help but frown. He knew that Mississippi Lu was afraid of bitterness. Rui said that she had never touched bitter things since she was a child. How to make her drink this bowl of medicine was not a small problem. You go in. The big man stood up, waved his hand, and said, I'll go to see Mississippi. After a while, Li Yi walked in with the medicine. Seeing Mississippi Lu sitting cross-legged on the bed, he walked to the bedside and said, Drink the medicine first. Mississippi Lu opened her eyes and looked at the black medicine. She shook her head and said, I'll take care of myself slowly. I don't need to drink medicine. Li Yi looked at her and said, Drink it. It's not bitter. Mississippi Lu looked at him suspiciously. Li Yi said with a straight face, I just tasted it. It's not bitter at all. If you don't believe me, look. He picked up the bowl and drank a big mouthful. His expression did not change. Mississippi Lu took the bowl from his hand doubtfully. After tasting a small mouthful, her pretty face immediately frowned. She glared at him and said, You lied to me. Li Yi looked at her and said, Good medicine tastes bitter. Drink it quickly. You'll feel better after drinking it, and we can go back sooner. I won't drink it. Mississippi Lu put the bowl aside and glared at him for being lied to. She closed her eyes and continued to recuperate. Drink it. Drink it and I'll give you a piece of candy. Li Yi persuaded her. Mississippi Lu glanced at him and said, Childish. 2 pieces. Give it to me first. In the meeting hall of the Lin family. More than 10 people were sitting in the hall. A woman named Lin Wanru sat at the bottom. She put a thick book on the table and said, This is the account for this time. Please take a look. As soon as she finished speaking, a thin man stood up and said, Little Ru, Lin Fang said that you encountered bandits on your way back. Is that true? Lin Wanru nodded and said, We did encounter a little trouble, but it was solved smoothly in the end. What trouble? A middle-aged man with a short beard frowned and said, Didn't I tell you to follow the caravan of the Bai family this time? Why didn't you come back with them? You were lucky this time. What if you encountered a bigger danger? Second uncle, the Bai family is the Bai family, and the Lin family is the Lin family. Lin Wanru looked at him and said, Why do we have to follow the Bai family for everything? The man with a short beard said, The Bai family and the Lin family are old friends. Why do you have to distinguish so clearly? Besides, when you marry in the future, second uncle, if there's nothing else, Wanru will go back first. Before the man with a short beard finished his words, Lin Wanru stood up and said directly. You. The short-bearded man pointed at him and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about this first. I heard that this time you used 8,000 taels of silver to buy a glazed ware. Such a large amount, why didn't you discuss it with us beforehand? If something went wrong, who would bear the responsibility?" "I will take the responsibility." Lin Wanru looked at him and said, "Glazed ware is extremely rare. I intend to make this glazed ware the treasure of the shop. If such a glazed ware is placed in the shop, it will definitely attract more customers. That's a good idea. We can give it a try. If it doesn't work, we can also resell it. The glazed bracelets sold by the Treasure Pavilion a few days ago are very expensive." After she finished her words, everyone thought carefully, and suddenly there were many voices of agreement in the hall. The man with a short beard opened his mouth and didn't know how to refute. He thought for a moment and asked, "I heard that when you came back this time, you also brought back 2 people. Who are they?" Lin Wanru thought for a moment and said, "I saved them from those mountain bandits." The man with a short beard frowned and said, "The Lin family is not a charity hole. You can't take them back after you save them. Let them go these days. The Lin family doesn't keep idle people. They aren't idle people." Lin Wanru looked at the short-bearded man and said, "That scholar is the accountant I just hired. A few days ago, Uncle Seuss said that his eyes were blurred from old age and he could no longer read the account books. He told me to hurry up and find a new accountant to replace him so that he can retire. That scholar is the new accountant. The accountant is such an important position, how can we let an unknown outsider do it?" The man with a short beard shook his head and said, "No, I don't agree. Father handed over the family business to me before he died. It doesn't matter if second uncle doesn't agree." Lin Wanru looked at everyone and said, "In 2 days, I will let him take over the accounts from Uncle Sue. Does any uncle have any objections?" The man with a short beard looked back and gave a look to the others. "I think what second brother said is reasonable. The accountant is so important, how can we let an unknown outsider do it?" "No, I also don't agree with this. Xiao Ru, you should find another one." Immediately, many people stood up and spoke. The woman called Lin Wanru looked at them and nodded. She said, "Since no one agrees, then this matter is decided." Chapter 665. Look at that, look at that. The short-bearded man pointed at Lin Wanru's back and said angrily, "This girl is getting more and more outrageous. Does she still have any respect for us elders? It's already like this now. In a few years, when she gets married, the Lin family will no longer have the surname Lin. She has become more and more arbitrary in the past 2 years. If this goes on, the Lin family will become her own Lin family." After Lin Wanru left, the meeting room immediately became noisy under the leadership of the short-bearded man. All right, an old man sitting at the head of the table waved his hand, stood up and said, "That's enough. It's not the first time you've seen her like this. You've been given the money every year. Just take the money honestly and don't meddle in the business affairs." The old man glanced at the crowd and slowly walked out with his hands behind his back. The short-bearded man's face alternated between red and white. After a moment, he waved his hand and said, "In any case, I don't agree to let an outsider manage the accounts of the Lin family. I'd like to see what kind of person she brought back." After that, he snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves and left. In the small courtyard, the woman named Lin Wanru put 2 thick account books on the stone table and said, "It's not a problem to let you stay in the Lin family for a while, but there must be a reason. Otherwise, there will be some trouble. I'll leave these 2 account books with you. If anyone asks, tell them that you're my new accountant. If you have any other plans in the future, you can leave at any time." Lee nodded and said, "Thank you, Miss Lin." "Don't thank me." Lin Wanru looked into the room and said, "Although you are a scholar, but since you have come this far, you should put away that weak scholar act and act like a man. In the future, when you two live and start a family, it won't be as simple as studying. A woman can do this for you. I hope you won't let her down." After saying this, she turned around and left. Li Yi stood there in a daze, his expression somewhat blank. The man walked over and patted him on the shoulder, saying, "Mrs. Ant ran away with a scholar despite her family's objections." Later, the scholar had a new lover, and then, that young lady's ending wasn't very good. The man sighed and said, "He passed away less than 2 years after returning to the Fu. Young Miss used to be closest to him, so she has always had prejudice against scholars." Li Yi's face was filled with astonishment. He never thought that Miss Lin would have such an experience. In that case, if he and Mississippi Lu hadn't been misunderstood by her, they wouldn't have received such care along the way. The man patted him on the shoulder again and said, "So, you should treat this young lady a little better. What my young miss hates the most is people who abandon others after they have used them." Li Yi came back to his senses and nodded, saying, "Don't worry, I will definitely treat her well. Li brothers, you don't look like that kind of person. I believe you, otherwise, young miss wouldn't take care of you like this." The man smiled and waved his hand to leave. Li Yi shook his head. When he was about to walk back to his room, a voice suddenly came from behind him. "Stop." He turned his head and saw a few figures step into the small courtyard. The leader was a middle-aged man with a short beard. The two people behind him were obviously lackeys and could be automatically ignored. The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, "You are the accountant that Wanru hired?" "That's right," Li Yi replied. The man in front of him seemed to have a trace of hostility towards him. From the way he addressed Miss Lin and the information he got from the man, it should be the trouble that Lin Wanru mentioned earlier. The middle-aged man looked at him and said in a threatening tone, "I don't care what she promised you. I just want to give you a piece of advice. Don't meddle in the affairs of the Lin family. Young man, you should know what it means to invite trouble." Li gently waved his sleeves and didn't say anything. Being ignored, the middle-aged man showed a trace of anger on his face and said, "Do you know who I am?" "I don't know who you are." Li sighed and pointed at the hem of his robe. He said, "I only know what it means to invite trouble." The middle-aged man looked down in the direction of his finger. Then, his expression changed greatly. He didn't know when, but the hem of his robe was burning. Beside his feet was a pot that was used to boil medicine. At this time, the fire under the pot was so strong that it actually burned the hem of his robe. "Second master, there's a pond outside." A person beside him saw him struggling to unbutton a row of buttons on his robe and said hurriedly. The second master was stunned for a moment when he heard this. Then, he ran outside. "No manners. Don't you know to close the door?" After the three of them left in a hurry, Li Yi walked over to close the courtyard door. When he walked back again, he waved his sleeves casually and blew part of the fire to the side. Next, he just needed to use a small fire to boil it for a while. Mississippi Lu, who had changed her clothes, walked out and sat on the stone bench in the courtyard. She asked, "When are we going back?" She couldn't always wear the clothes of the inn's manservant. When Miss Lin came just now, she asked someone to bring food and some clothes for her. "When your injury is better," Li Yi said as he poked the fire. Going back could not be rushed for the time being. Now, he had to think of a way to get some money. Obviously, one word could decide a business of hundreds of thousands of taels of silver. Now, the two of them didn't even have a copper coin. They couldn't rely on Miss Lin for everything. Mississippi Lu's body was weak now. If he bought some precious medicinal herbs to make some medicinal cuisine, her injury would probably recover faster. And all of this required silver. These things could wait until they moved out of the Lin family in a few days. After a while, Lee filtered the brewed medicine into a bowl and walked into the room. He looked at Mississippi Lou and said, "It's time to take the medicine." Mississippi Lou looked up at him and stretched out her hand. "There's only one left." Lee put the last milk candy in her hand. "Then drink half." Mississippi Lou put the candy away and said. Lee shook his head and said firmly, "No, drink all of it." Mississippi Lou frowned. "Half." Lee suddenly thought of something and asked, "You can't use your true chi now, right?" As if she smelled something, Mississippi Lou looked up at him and asked, "What do you want? What do you think?" Lee looked down at her and said with a smile, "Be good and open your mouth, don't you dare." "Are you going to open your mouth or not?" "No. Don't force me to do it myself. Try moving." "I'll try. Let me go. Just you wait. When my injury is healed, outside the courtyard, Lin Wanru wanted to remind the scholar not to care about what others said. Hearing the faint voice coming from inside, she stood outside the door in a daze and couldn't help but blush. She looked inside in embarrassment and anger, then quickly turned around and left. After a while, Lee walked out of the room and saw the 2 account books on the stone table in the courtyard. He walked over slowly. Chapter 666. In June of the first year of Jinghe, from the moment he saw Mississippi Lou on the horse for the first time, he had lost countless confrontations with Mississippi Lou. It was the first time that Li Yi was in an absolute advantage. Finally, he could hold his head high and sing like a surf. Even his mood inexplicably became better. He picked up the 2 account books and casually flipped through them. He usually asked others to check the accounts. He had never experienced the feeling of being an accountant. He shook his head and turned into the room. In the room, Mississippi Lou sat on the bed and looked at him coldly with eyes as sharp as swords. Anyway, she couldn't beat him now. Maybe when she recovered, she wouldn't be able to beat him anymore. Thinking about it, he was a little expectant. Sitting at the table, he opened the 2 account books and read them carefully. Achoo! Somewhere in the Lin mansion, a short-bearded man wrapped in a quilt sat on the bed and sneezed fiercely. Yesterday, his clothes caught fire and he jumped into the pond in the mansion in a hurry. Although he wasn't burned, he felt dizzy the next morning. The doctor said that he had caught a cold and had to stay at home to recuperate these days. This caused his dissatisfaction towards the new accountant in the manor to almost reach its peak. A young man stood in front of the bed and said with a frown, "Father, big sister is too much. She simply treats the Lin family as her own. This can't go on. I only asked her for 100 taels of silver today, but she didn't give it to me. She even asked me where I spent the 200 taels of silver last time." The short-bearded man waved his hand and said, "I know. Go and call your 3rd uncle and 4th uncle." "Okay, I'll go right away." The young man answered, stood up and walked out of the door. "Wait a minute." The short-bearded man stopped him and asked, "Where did you spend the 200 taels of silver last time?" The young man was stunned and said, "I donated it to Miss Xiangxiang in the top courtesan competition of Spring Fragrance House." "You are generous to throw 200 taels of silver to a prostitute like this." The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, "Go. When you come back, go to the ancestral hall and kneel for 4 hours." The young man who was about to step out stopped. Li Yi gave a long stretch, and a crackling sound came from his body. After more than a month of bumping, he didn't eat or sleep well. He finally slept on the bed for a day, but now he had to sleep on the ground again. It was better to move out as soon as possible. This morning, he was going to take a look at the Lin family's shop. He had made an appointment with the man named Lin Yong yesterday. On the way, he was going to tidy up the yard there. If he was fast, he could move in tonight. Lee brothers, have you woken up? We're about to go. Just as he finished washing up and walked into the courtyard, the big man was already shouting outside the door. I'm coming. Lee Yi stood in the courtyard and replied to him. He then returned to his room to inform Miss Lu before opening the door and walking out. The burly man called Lin Yong walked over and urged, "Hurry up, young miss should have already gone out by now." Li Yi waved his hand. Let's go. The Lin family owned a few jewelry shops in Feng Prefecture. Although they were not considered as wealthy merchants, they were still quite well off. The shop they were going to was located in the most prosperous area in the center of the city. The name of the shop was pretty good. Fragrant Forest Park. The name of this jewelry shop was very unique. When a scholar was tired of studying and wanted to relax, he would walk on the street and look up, and coincidentally see such an attractive brothel. Therefore, he happily entered the shop, but because he touched a female employee's hand, he was surrounded by people. He couldn't escape the crime of taking liberties with a woman. Helpless, he could only spend 100 taels of silver in the shop to settle the matter. Otherwise, he would be reported to the authorities. Unfortunately, there were only male employees in the shop. It was obvious that Miss Lin had not thought of such a good way to make money. These are all valuable things. You guys move slowly. Put this down, I'll do it. The man in front directed the workers to unload the goods from the carriage. Among them, there were many goods that were transported from the Jing Kingdom. Although the Jing Kingdom lagged behind the Qi Kingdom in many aspects in terms of economy and military, it was far ahead in terms of fashion. It was the target of pursuit by all the neighboring countries, including the Qi Kingdom. Ruidu, perfume, soap, and women's bras were popular in the Jing Kingdom. They were also very popular in the Qi Kingdom. Many merchants had shipped these goods from the Jing Kingdom to the Qi Kingdom and made a fortune. If the old emperor saw this scene, he would be very pleased. In some aspects, the Jing Kingdom had subtly influenced many neighboring countries. Put this in the most conspicuous place. Be careful. This horse is worth 8,000 taels of silver. If it's damaged, you won't be able to pay for it even if you sell yourself. Li Yi saw the man take out an item from the box and put it in a place where he could see it as soon as he stepped into the shop. He couldn't help but be stunned. After a while, he slowly walked over and asked the woman, "Miss Lin, did you also buy this horse from the Jing Kingdom?" Lin Wanru glanced at her and said lightly, "This is called Flying Swallow Horse." Of course, Li Yi knew this horse was called Flying Swallow Horse. The 4 words on the pedestal were made by him. This Miss Lin treated him and Mississippi Lu well. Li Yi really felt bad for letting her spend 8,000 taels of silver to buy such a thing. Her situation in the Lin mansion was not very good. If she really sold Liolia's glass, wouldn't she be blamed by those people? As a person who knew how to repay kindness, he would remind her to change hands as soon as possible if there was a chance in the future. Otherwise, he would feel even worse. However, this Miss Lin didn't seem to be in a good mood now. There was still a long way to go. It wouldn't hurt to tell her in a few days. That girl is still injured. Hearing her sudden words, Li Yi turned his head in confusion. He didn't know why she suddenly said this. Lin Wanru glanced at him. Her expression was slightly abnormal. She said, "During this period, you'd better control yourself." Control? Control what? Li Yi asked doubtfully. This time, Lin Wanru didn't answer. She directly turned her head and left. Inexplicable. Watching her leave in a hurry, Li Yi shook his head. He walked over and asked the man, "Brother Lin, where is the nearest pawn shop?" Pawn shop. A trace of doubt appeared on the man's face. He asked, "Why do you ask about the pawn shop? If you don't have money, just tell me. You can take some from me first. Li shook his head and said, I happen to have some useless things on me. I want to pawn them. Okay. The burly man nodded, pointed in a certain direction, and said, the pawn shop is quite far from here. Walk forward from here. Do you see that cloud? Walk to the bottom of that cloud, turn right into a street, and then turn left. You still have to walk for about 2 more streets, and then, the man scratched his head and said, I only remember this much. When you get there, you can find someone to ask. Li was proud of his sense of direction to be able to find this pawn shop with such an unreliable way. He looked at the 2 big words, pawn shop, erected at the door of the shop and walked in. Chapter 667. Inside a pawn shop in Feng State City. The pawn shop's manager was a middle-aged man with a big belly. He wore a robe embroidered with copper coins. His eyes were so small that they were almost invisible when he squinted. He was holding a jade pendant in his hand and carefully examining it. After a while, he put down the jade pendant and looked at the man wearing a bamboo hat in front of him, saying, I'm sorry, sir, but we can't accept this jade pendant. Why? The man wearing a bamboo hat had an ethereal voice, and his age was indiscernible. The shopkeeper changed the topic and asked, May I ask, sir, where did you get this jade pendant from? I picked it up, the man replied lightly. As a pawn shop manager, he had heard this kind of excuse many times in his life. He smiled and said, without the permission of the emperor, even a prince can't wear such a jade pendant. Either the person who made this jade pendant is extremely daring, or the person who stole it has eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. Our shop is small, so we don't dare to accept this kind of thing. If that's the case, then I'll take my leave. The man wearing a bamboo hat put away the jade pendant and turned to leave without hesitation. He didn't expect that the other party would be so straightforward. The fat manager's expression changed and he immediately said, Wait. 1,000 taels of silver. He looked at the man's back and said, 1,000 taels of silver. Leave this jade pendant here. I can't go any higher. Let me tell you the truth, no one in Feng State City would dare to accept this jade pendant except for me. The quality of this jade pendant was the best. It was shaped like a 5-clawed golden dragon that only emperors could have. Of course, this didn't mean that this kind of jade pendant only appeared in the royal family. Some officials who had great merits or were extremely favored would often be rewarded by the emperor. They would be able to own some royal items, but these things were treated as family heirlooms and rarely leaked out. Because of this, the value of these items was extremely high. Although they couldn't be sold openly, there was actually a market for them secretly. The manager walked to the door and closed it. He then slowly said, How about it? Do you want to consider it? After a quarter of an hour, a man wearing a bamboo hat came out of a pawn shop in Feng State City with a bag in his hand. 1,000 taels of silver sounded like a lot, but it wasn't heavy at all. In the future, it would only be about 60 pounds. Buying medicinal herbs and other things required a lot of silver. The most valuable things they had were Mississippi Lou's autumn water and the jade pendant hanging on it. Mississippi Lou wouldn't sell the jade pendant even if she was beaten to death. He forgot when she had asked for that jade pendant from him. A dragon-shaped jade pendant was rarely seen. It was probably given by the old emperor. He didn't expect that it would come. As for the bamboo hat on his head, he had just bought it on the street. He had even borrowed a few taels of silver from the burly man surnamed Lin. Although no one here knew him, it was better to be vigilant just to be on the safe side. After all, he had a bamboo hat, and a middle-aged man. Bai, and Li, and He Ling. On his way here, he passed by a medicine shop and wanted to buy some useful medicinal ingredients. Li took a few steps and suddenly stopped. He turned his head to look and saw two shadows flashing into the alley. Li didn't stop and continued forward. Big brother, that man just came out of the pawn shop. His bag was bulging. He must have pawned something good. He's alone. Let's follow him. We might be able to kill a fat sheep this time. Contact third brother. We have a job. Whispers could be heard coming from a small alley somewhere. After an hour, Li came out of a pharmacy. He looked back and shook his head. How was this buying medicine? This was robbery. 1,000 taels of silver was gone in an instant. All he got was a small bag of medicinal herbs. It seemed that the difficulty of seeing a doctor and buying medicine had been like this since ancient times. He stood at the entrance of the pharmacy and looked in a certain direction. After walking for a short distance, he turned and walked into another alley. Chance. In the crowd, several people's faces lit up, and they quickly walked towards the small alley. Where is he? After a while, they looked at the dead end in front of them. They looked like they had seen a ghost. They clearly saw the man wearing the bamboo hat walk in here. How did he suddenly disappear? Could it be that he flew into the sky? Just as this thought appeared, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of them. Li jumped down from the wall and knocked out 3 people. He stood at the entrance of the alley and asked the last person, "Who sent you? Where is the Empress?" What Empress? The last man's face was pale and cold sweat dripped from his forehead. It's good that you don't know her. Li walked over and knocked him out. He walked out of the alley. Halfway out, he turned back. He searched the waists of the 4 people and took out a few money bags. This was a critical time. It was time to pick up his old profession. His family is quite well off. He collected the dozens of taels of silver and walked out of the alley. At the same time, 2 streets away, another young man stepped into Fragrant Forest Park. Greetings, young Master Bai. Inside the shop, several workers immediately bowed and greeted him. In a corner of the shop, the man surnamed Lin curled his lips and said, "That Bai guy, why is he here again?" The young man smiled and asked, "Is Wanru in the shop?" A worker immediately said, "Miss is in the back." The young man nodded. Just as he was about to go over, his expression suddenly froze. He looked in a certain direction in the shop. This is, horse stepping on swallow, colored glaze. The young man's face revealed a surprised expression. When he was about to reach out to touch it, someone grabbed his wrist from the side. Don't touch it. It's very valuable. The man named Lin Yong said expressionlessly. The young man showed an apologetic expression and said, "Sorry, it's the first time I've seen such a perfect colored glaze. I couldn't help myself." His eyes stayed on the colored glaze for a while. Seeing a figure walk out from the back, he hurriedly walked over and said with concern, "Wanru, I heard that you encountered bandits on your way back. How are you? Are you hurt?" A guilty expression appeared on the young man's face. "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go. It's all my fault." Lin Wanru took a step back and said, "Thank you for your concern, Brother Bai. I'm fine. As long as you're fine." The young man nodded, then a smile appeared on his face as he said, "Yesterday, I happened to get a piece of Zhao Xuan's calligraphy. I don't know much about poetry, but I know Wanru likes it, so I specially brought it over today as an apology." He waved his hand. Immediately, someone behind him took out a scroll of painting and unfolded it on the table beside him. Light perspiration slightly penetrates the jade, bathing fragrant orchids during the Ming Dynasty's Dragon Boat Festival. Fragrance blossoms fill the clear river. Colorful threads lightly wrap around red jade arms. Small talismans hang diagonally from green clouds. Beautiful people meet for 1,000 years. The handwriting on it was elegant, like moving clouds and flowing water. It was an excellent piece of semi-cursive writing. Zhao Xiuwen was the #1 poet in the Qi kingdom. Although he was young, he was very talented in poetry. Even those who did not know poetry would have heard of his reputation. The young man explained, "This poem is called Guanxi Sha, Duanwu." It is said that when Zhao Xiuwen was competing with the #1 scholar in the Jing kingdom, the scholar wrote it. After Zhao Xiuwen returned to the Jing kingdom, he admired the scholar very much. He even imitated the scholar's handwriting many times. This is one of his imitations. Therefore, the style of his handwriting is different from his usual style. Lin Wanru looked at the words. A strange look appeared in her eyes, but she quickly hid it. She shook her head and said, "This is too valuable. I can't accept it." Zhao Xiuwen was very famous in the Qi kingdom. Not only was he famous for his poetry, but his calligraphy had also reached the peak. However, Zhao Xiuwen treasured his calligraphy very much. Other than a few pieces, he rarely let them out. Because of this, his calligraphy had always been very valuable. It was said that each word was worth 1,000 taels of gold. The young man smiled and said, "Wanru, you don't have to decline. If this is left with me, it would be the real Emmingsu casting herself in the dark." The man named Lin Yong stood at the side. He touched his chin and said, "I don't think there's anything good about this. It can't be fake, right?" A servant behind the young man said angrily, "You fool, do you think you can understand Lord Zhao's words?" "I don't understand. Do you?" The big man glanced at him and casually pulled over a young man who had just walked into the shop. He asked, "Li brothers, they said this was written by Zhao Xiuwen. You are a scholar. Come and take a look. Is this calligraphy good?" Li Yi put down the bag and glanced at it. He said, "It's fake." Chapter 668. How could he not know whether this Huanxi Sha, Duan Wu painting before him was the work of Zhao Xiuwen? Back then, that shameless fellow had begged him to give him the original manuscript of this famous poem. He had even brought up the international relations between the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom. Later, he had even personally sent a work that he was proud of to his home. It was impossible for him not to accept it. If he had known that this fellow's calligraphy and paintings were worth so much money in the Qi kingdom, he would not have pawned the jade pendant that the old emperor had given him. Of course, shamelessness was one thing. When it came to poetry and composition, Li Yi had to admit that this fellow was indeed a genius. He could barely produce good calligraphy. There was no need for him to copy Wang Shiji's semi-cursive script into such a cowardly appearance. If anyone dared to say that this piece of calligraphy was written by Zhao Xiuwen himself would probably want to beat that person up. The man curled his lips and said, "Look, look. Even the Li brothers are saying that your calligraphy is fake. Hurry up and take it back." Before the young man could speak, the servant beside him immediately jumped out and said loudly, "Who are you? If you say it's fake, then it's fake. My young master spent 2,000 taels of silver to buy it. If you don't know anything, then don't speak carelessly. Brother, are you saying that this piece of calligraphy is fake?" The young man did not get angry. Instead, he revealed a smile and looked at him as he asked. Li Yi shook his head and said, "The calligraphy can't be said to be fake. However, if you insist that it was written by Zhao Xiuwen, then it's a little fake." The young man asked again, "Brother, do you have proof?" Lin Wanru, who was at the side, tilted her head to look at him and shook her head slightly. Although Zhao Xiuwen was famous in the Qi kingdom, it did not affect the Jing kingdom. He might not even know who Zhao Xiuwen was, so how could he know Zhao Xiuwen's calligraphy? Even she, who was extremely familiar with Zhao Xiuwen's handwriting, could not tell that this piece of calligraphy was fake. How could this poor scholar who was picked up on the road be able to tell? If he spoke so casually, he would be put on the spot later. Evidence. Li Yi casually took a pen from the counter and scribbled on another piece of paper before saying, coincidentally, I am just like Zhao Xiuwen. I admire the #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom who is handsome, elegant, literary, and peerless in martial arts. I like to copy his handwriting. Sire, surely you don't think that the famous Zhao Xiuwen of the Qi Kingdom is inferior to a nobody like me? Li Yi put down the pen and the piece of paper. When Lin Wanru and the young man looked over, they couldn't help but be stunned. There was only one sentence on that piece of paper. It was the last sentence of the Huanxi Sha, Duanwu, beauty meets for 1,000 years. If there was no comparison, there would be no harm. Although Lin Wanru could not be considered a talented girl, she had received the education of a noble lady in the Lin family since she was young, so she still had the basic ability to distinguish between good and bad. This sentence, beauty meets for 1,000 years, was indeed much more pleasing to the eye. Just now, she had thought that the painting that Bai Yu had sent over was Zhao Xiuwen's authentic work. Now, it seemed that this scholar's writing was even more authentic than Zhao Xiuwen's. Zhao Xiuwen was a role model for the scholars of the Qi Kingdom. Naturally, he would not be defeated so easily by a scholar he had picked up from the streets. The only explanation was that this was not Zhao Xiuwen's authentic work. The youth surnamed Bai's face alternated between green and red. After a while, he sighed and cupped his hands towards Li Yi, saying, "It was this Bai's poor eyesight that allowed me to be deceived by others. Thank you for the reminder, brother. I am Bai Yu, may I know your name?" Li Yi cupped his hands and said, "Brother Bai is too polite. Just call me Li Xian." "Wanru, I am truly sorry. It was all my negligence." The young man nodded at him. Then, he looked at Lin Wanru and said apologetically, "I still have some matters to attend to. I will take my leave first." The young man came quickly and left just as quickly. Of course, before he left, he took the authentic work of Zhao Xiuwen with him. It was no wonder that this Miss Lin was not interested in him at all. He did not care at all when it came to picking up girls. He either did not give her a gift or gave her a fake one. Most importantly, he was exposed in front of her. For someone like this to be able to pick up girls, he must be very rich. The man asked with a gossipy expression, "Li brothers, you said earlier that the #1 scholar of the Jing Kingdom was handsome, elegant, literary, and unparalleled in martial arts. Is that true or false? Isn't he a scholar? How could he be unparalleled in martial arts?" Li Yi looked at him and said, "Do you know that he is well versed in both literature and martial arts? In the Jing Kingdom, the name, Deadly Scholar, can stop children from crying at night. Which martial artist in the martial arts world would not tremble upon hearing it?" Lin Wanru thought for a while and suddenly said, "I have heard that Li Yi is no more than 4 feet and 5 inches tall. He is short and has the head of a rat and the eyes of a deer." What? Li Yi could not help but widen his eyes when he heard this. 1 foot and 33 centimeters, 4 feet and 5 inches. In total, he was not even 1.5 meters tall. Was he that short? And the remaining 1 foot was eaten by the people of the Qi Kingdom. Short and 5 inches tall. Rat in the eyes of a deer. Just go to the capital and ask around. Who would not give a thumbs up when the name of County Uncle Li was mentioned? Who did not know that County Uncle Li was handsome and elegant? He was the object of love for countless girls in the capital, regardless of gender and age. Slander, this was a shameful slander. He said with some embarrassment and anger, "Who said this?" "That is what people say." Lin Wanru put away the piece of paper and said, "However, you are from the Jing Kingdom, so you should have seen the #1 scholar." "It seems that the rumors are wrong." Li Yi agreed with her words and said, "Wrong. It is not just wrong, it is a big mistake. The man nodded and said, I think so too. No matter what, he is the #1 scholar. He must be much better than Bai, that pretty boy. You are right. County Uncle Lee is naturally not comparable to those pretty boys. Lee nodded and said. The man looked at him with a strange look and said, Aren't you scholars all pretty boys? Young master, that guy dared to deceive us with a fake. Report him to the authorities immediately. On the street, a servant behind the young man said angrily while gritting his teeth. You don't have to worry about this. The young man stopped in his tracks and turned around to say, Find out the background of that Li Xian and his relationship with Wanru. Yes, young master. The servant was stunned for a moment and immediately replied. At the same time, in an alley somewhere in the city, a figure slowly climbed up with the help of the wall. He rubbed his slightly aching head and shook the 3 people lying around him to wake them up. What happened just now? I think I was knocked out. Where is that fat sheep? Fat sheep my ass. The leader of the group knocked his head. He thought it was a fat sheep, but he did not expect to be blocked by a tiger. Not only did he get beaten up, but he also lost his wallet. Next time, keep your eyes open. If you see someone wearing a bamboo hat, take a detour. The leader rubbed his head and said bitterly, Let's go. Not long after, several people walked out of the alley. As they walked on the street, they began to look for their next target. The big man saw a scholar coming out of a brothel. Before he could walk over, he was suddenly pulled by the arm and pulled to a corner. What are you doing? His expression changed. He thought that he was about to be discovered. When he turned around and saw a thin man, his expression relaxed and he said in an unfriendly tone. The thin man looked at him and said mysteriously, May I ask if you have heard of the Empress? The Empress? The man was stunned for a moment. He pondered these words and finally thought of something. His eyes became fierce. You're together. What? Together. The thin man's face was just filled with doubt when his abdomen was kicked and he was sent flying. It's the Empress again, you guys are in cahoots, right? The Empress of Heaven, right? I'll let you be the Empress. The big man rushed over in 2 steps and punched and kicked the thin man. After a long time, he stopped with satisfaction and spat on the ground. Scram! If you dare mention the Empress in front of me again, I'll beat you up every time I see you. Chapter 669. Lee brothers, the courtyard has been tidied up. You and that lady will live here from now on. Lin Yong walked out of a small courtyard next to Fong Lin Park and said, This place is close to the shop, so we can take care of each other. The courtyard had been tidied up by a few shop assistants. It was said that it was where Miss Lin stayed for a short period of time. It was not big, but the location was very good. It was almost in the prime area of the city. Li Yi went in with the man's lead. Next to the main room, there was a small kitchen. It looked like it had never been used. It could be used with some pots and pans, which was exactly what he wanted. Apart from the small kitchen, there was only one room. This place is not big. Miss used to rest occasionally at noon. You two can make do with it. The big man looked around and said, See if you still lack anything and tell me. Tomorrow, Miss will have someone send it over from the mansion. Li Yi shook his head and said, Thank Miss Lin for me, but there is no need. We can slowly add the rest in the future. After the man left, Li Yi first bought 2 bolts of cloth from the cloth shop outside and hung them in the room, dividing the bedroom from the middle. There were no extra rooms here, so he could only make do like this. The kitchen utensils were also bought, and he even had time to buy rice and vegetables. Before the sun set, he had almost bought everything he needed. If there was anything missing, he could wait until tomorrow. After that, he locked the door. Fong Lin Park happened to be closed, so he returned to the Lin family with the man. He refused the man's offer to send them in a carriage and helped Mississippi Lu out of the courtyard. He had been away from home for more than a month. He didn't know how Rui and the others were doing. The news from Shuzhou would probably take a few days to get back. They probably didn't expect that he had come to the Qi Kingdom. He had to find a way to get the news out as soon as possible. He didn't have to worry about the situation in the capital. Even if the academy had its own operating system, with Li Xian watching over it and Li Han around, there wouldn't be any problems. It was unlikely that anything big would happen to his family, and it was unlikely that the old emperor's health would deteriorate to that extent in just 3 to 5 months. Yongning and Shaning would probably stay in the palace for a long time. He didn't know if the eldest princess would still practice her sword in the morning dew hall every day. What was the situation in the small courtyard in Willow Lane? Li Yi didn't know any of this. When he walked out of the Lin mansion, he turned his head and saw that Miss Lu was frowning. Li Yi thought for a while, squatted down and said, "Come on up." Mississippi Lu shook her head and said, "It's okay. I can walk." Li Yi urged, "You don't have a problem, but I do. It's getting dark. If we continue walking like this, we won't make it before the curfew. Hurry up, don't dawdle." Mississippi Lu glanced at him, gritted her teeth, and said, "When my injuries are healed." Li Yi lifted his head and looked at her. "What do you want to do after you've recovered?" "Hurry up, don't dawdle. I'll thank you properly when I recover." Mississippi Lu laid on Li Yi's back and slowly closed her eyes. She emphasized on the word "thank you." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "You're welcome. We're family. It's what I should do." It took about half an hour to walk from the Lin family to the shop. The night was about to fall. There were not many pedestrians on the streets of Feng State City. Under the light of the setting sun, a long shadow spread out behind him. Li Yi suddenly sighed and said, "Don't be so silly in the future." This time, Mississippi Lu did not respond. Thinking of something, Li Yi tilted his head and asked, "Actually, there's something that I've always been curious about." "What is it?" Mississippi Lu asked lightly. "How did you fall in love with me?" Li Yi looked at her profile and asked, "The first time we met, you were riding on a horse." Mississippi Lu thought for a moment and said, "Uncle Fang said that the scholar looked easy to bully, so I chose him." Li Yi curled his lips and said, "Admit it. You were subdued by my temperament. At that time, your hair was messy, your clothes were untidy, your head was full of sweat, and you even lost one of your shoes. Is this your temperament?" Mississippi Lu suddenly asked curiously, "By the way, why did you run that day?" There was no way to continue this conversation. Li Yi turned his head and quickened his pace. He said, "I like to run." "It's none of your business." Feng Province was an important city of the Qi Kingdom. It was the political and military center of the surrounding prefectures. The curfew system was very strict. The city gates were closed at the hour of the sea. Even the red light streets and alleys were not allowed to walk on the streets at this time. Those who violated the rules would be punished, and those who violated the rules would be sentenced to death. After the second watch, there was no one except for the night watchmen and patrolling soldiers. At this time, it was close to the hour of the sea. There were not many people on the streets. A group of riders quickly entered the city and galloped through the streets. Soon, they arrived in front of a luxurious mansion. The figure at the very front dismounted his horse and asked, "Has His Highness rested?" A servant at the entrance of the mansion immediately said, "It's not the hour of the sea yet. His Highness is dealing with official business. Please wait for a moment, General. I'll go inform him immediately." Not long after, in a study in the mansion, Shen Han greets His Highness. The man knelt on the ground and greeted the young man behind the table respectfully. General Shen, you don't have to be so courteous. The young man quickly walked out from behind the table and helped him up. General Shen, please sit. He pointed to a chair at the side and then asked in confusion, General, you're not in Chong province. Why did you come here in the middle of the night? Is there something important? Chong province was at the border of the Qi kingdom. It was separated from the Jing kingdom's Shu province by a river. Shen Han was one of the generals guarding the city and would not leave the city easily. Your Highness, I do have something important to report. Shen Han cupped his hands and said, over a month ago, Li Yi was taken away from the capital of the Jing kingdom. A few days ago, he appeared in Shu province and then disappeared without a trace. The officials of Shu province almost turned the entire Shu province upside down, but they could not find him. I'm guessing that he has come to our Qi kingdom. The young man looked stunned and asked in disbelief, who did you say? Li Yi has come to the Qi kingdom. Yes. Shen Han's expression was solemn as he said, this news has almost spread throughout the Jing kingdom and reached Shu province a few days ago. I only learned about it a day ago, so I rushed over to inform your Highness. Shen Han had been to the capital with his Highness before, so he naturally knew how important Li Yi was to his Highness. He said, he has a grudge against the king of Shu. If he falls into the king's hands, he will not have a good ending. Moreover, he has not appeared in Shu province since then. I'm guessing that he has come to the Qi kingdom. That's great. The young man's face lit up with joy. He said, pass down the order immediately. Ask the surrounding counties to pay more attention. Once they find any traces of him, they must invite him to Feng province. In addition, send people to closely monitor the movements in Shu province. If he is discovered by the king of Shu in Shu province, immediately send envoys to negotiate. I understand. The man named Shen Han bowed and said. The young man walked to the window and looked out. A smile appeared on his face as he murmured, Brotherly, oh brotherly, we haven't seen each other for a long time. By the river in Shu province, an old man with unkempt hair stared at the surging river. A trace of doubt appeared on his face. Could it be that he has really gone to the Qi kingdom? Chapter 670. From today onwards, Li Yi planned to raise Mississippi Lu like a pig for a long time. The contents of this bowl of medicinal cuisine were very rich. Ordinary people might not be able to withstand the effects of the medicine, but with Mississippi Lu's physique, there was no need to worry about the problem of not being able to withstand it. With all kinds of tonics, the sooner her body recovered, the sooner she could go back. He served a bowl of porridge to Mississippi Lu and himself and sat in the yard. The man named Lin Yong walked in from outside. He was stunned for a moment and said, Li brothers, have you eaten? Li nodded and looked at him. Brother Lin, do you want a bowl? The big man waved his hand with a smile and said, No need, no need. I've already eaten on the way here. Li looked at him and asked, Really? Delicious, it's really delicious. Lin Yong put down the bowl, wiped his mouth, and praised, I didn't expect Li brothers to know how to cook, and your cooking skills are so good. If your sister-in-law had half of your cooking skills, I would wake up laughing in my dreams. Seeing him licking his lips, Li asked, Do you want another bowl? Enough, enough. Lin Yong smiled and waved his hand. I can't eat any more. When he ate the second bowl, Lin Yong's hands finally slowed down. While eating, he said, I've seen those scholars often say that the kitchen is far from the kitchen. Li brothers, you are different from them. Miss Lu followed you because of her good fortune in her previous life. She didn't choose the wrong person. Li looked back. Fortunately, Mississippi Lu's body hadn't recovered yet. Otherwise, this brother Lin would definitely come in vertically and leave horizontally. Recently, he often saw Lin Yong these days. The things in the jewelry store were very valuable. Losing any one of them would be a big loss. Not to mention, if they were to encounter a group of bold people who would openly rob them, the loss of a single store would mean that everyone in the Lin family would have to starve for a whole year. Therefore, the Lin family arranged a lot of guards in every store. The Fong Lin court next to it was under Lin Yong's responsibility. Those fellows at home don't have any other skills, but they know how to stab their own people in the back. These few days, they said that young Miss spent 8,000 taels of silver to buy a decoration, and they said that they hired an outsider to be their accountant. Lin Yong said, "If Li brothers hear any rumors, don't mind them. They are just idle all day." Li Yi couldn't be bothered with the matters of the Lin family. Naturally, he wouldn't care about it. That Miss Lin obviously had some tricks up her sleeve. It shouldn't be a problem for her to deal with those people. In the past few days, he accompanied Mississippi Lu to chat, sleep, and when he was really bored, he did some accounting. He was idle, but he spent his money quickly. In a few days, he spent another 200 taels of silver. Buying medicine really burned money. He had free time, but he didn't stop practicing. His inner strength had almost caught up, but his experience and moves were still very lacking. Mississippi Lu was injured, but it didn't stop her from sitting at the side and giving pointers. When he turned around, he saw Lin Wanru standing at the door in a daze. A trace of surprise appeared on Li Yi's face. He said, "Miss Lin, what's the matter?" Lin Wanru came back to her senses and shook her head. She said, "It's nothing. I'll leave first." It was just that every time she was upset, she would come here out of habit. This time, she forgot that she had arranged for the eloping couple to stay here. "Miss Lin, wait a moment." Li Yi called out to her. He walked back into the house and took something out. He handed her the account book that Lin Wanru gave him a few days ago. He said, "These 2 accounts have been checked. The details are in here. Miss Lin, take it back." Lin Wanru nodded, took the account book, and turned to leave. She had just sent the account book a few days ago. An accountant would need at least half a month to check all the accounts of the Lin family for an entire year. Moreover, Lin Wanru knew very well that he had been around Miss Lu for the past few days. He had been taking care of her in every possible way. How could he have had the time to check the accounts? Fortunately, he had already checked the accounts. He had only sent them for others to see so that they wouldn't gossip behind his back. Now that he had achieved his goal, he naturally had to take back the accounts. "That's right, who is Lin Xuan?" Li Yi suddenly asked when Lin Wanru was about to leave. Lin Wanru turned her head and said, "My second uncle." "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Goodbye, Miss Lin. Raise your hand a little higher. Did you not eat? Too slow. If you met a true expert, your head would have fallen off before you could stab with your sword. This time, it was too fast. I didn't see it clearly. Let's do it again." As Lin Wanru walked out of the courtyard, she heard Miss Lu's voice coming from behind her. She looked behind her, shook her head, and left. The way this young man and woman interacted with each other was hard to understand. The woman was extremely beautiful, but her temperament was a little cold. She seemed to be fond of playing with knives and swords. Elder Lin had also said that she was a martial artist. As for that scholar, she had never seen him read a book. Every day, he was busy in front of the stove. According to Brother Lin, the food he cooked was very delicious. Even the chefs of the restaurants couldn't compare. He didn't look like a scholar at all. Although he wasn't a scholar, his handwriting was so good that it was as good as the heavens. In private, she had also compared the words "a beauty meets for 1,000 years" to the calligraphy and paintings in her family collection. She felt that those words were not inferior to some famous calligraphers in the Qi kingdom. However, although it was strange, that scholar treated Miss Lu extremely well. If her aunt had met such a person in the past, she probably wouldn't have died with a grudge. Some thoughts emerged from the depths of her heart. Lin Wanru shook her head and suppressed those thoughts. What she needed to worry about at the moment was another matter. The people in the family, led by second uncle, had brought up some matters. In front of everyone, some of their words were very unpleasant to the ears. It was obvious that they were fighting for power. The second and third branches didn't have many resources in their hands. It was understandable that they wanted to force her to give up some of her power. Although she wasn't afraid of them, she naturally didn't want to see the peace in the family broken. Did you hear? Young Miss hired an accountant from outside. I don't know anything about him. I heard. He was placed next to the shop. I saw him the last time. I also heard that young Miss has an affair with that scholar. It can't be. Then what should young Master Bai do? When Lin Wanru walked in from outside, she saw the servants in the residence gathered together and whispered. When they saw her walking over, they quickly dispersed. Her expression didn't change as she walked straight back to her room. She placed the account book on the table and opened a book of poems. Not long after, a maid came in from outside and said, "Young miss, second master wants you to go to the meeting hall." Got it. Lin Wanru nodded and stood up. Her wrist accidentally brushed against the side of the table and an account book was accidentally swept off. She bent down to pick up the account book. When she saw a few pieces of paper fall out, she was slightly startled. Lin Xuan. At first glance, she saw a name written densely on that piece of paper. She also picked up the other pieces of paper. After looking at them carefully for a while, she put the account book to the side. It was only now that she finally understood what that scholar meant when he asked the question. Chapter 671. In the meeting room of the Lin family. Look at the accounts. The total income of the 3 shops last year was 10% less than that of the year before. The investment was obviously more, so there should be more surplus. This doesn't make sense. Lin Xuan was the second eldest in the Lin family and usually had a great say in the family. The eldest son of the Lin family died early, leaving only a daughter and a young son. It was reasonable to say that Lin Xuan, as the second eldest, could take over all the business of the Lin family. However, no one expected that the head of the family would hand over all the business of the Lin family to Lin Wanru, who was a woman, before he died. Lin Wanru was the eldest daughter of the Lin family. Before she got married, she was also a member of the Lin family. Moreover, she had shown a talent for business since she was a child and had participated in the family business for a long time. For this arrangement, everyone was embarrassed to say anything. Of course, not many people cared about how many means a girl could have. These things could be slowly taken back from her. When she got married, she wouldn't be able to take anything with her. However, later they realized that they still looked down on this niece. In the past 2 years, the business of the Lin family was getting bigger and bigger in her hands, and others couldn't get involved. In the past 2 years, she could be said to have monopolized the economic power of the Lin family. At this time, a young man said, "Second uncle, are you suspecting the eldest sister?" "I didn't say that." Lin Xuan picked up a booklet, patted it on the table, and said, "Anyway, the account book is here. The loss is the loss. I think Wanru has to give all of us an explanation for this matter." A middle-aged man thought for a moment, stood up and said, "Last year, the jewelry business was generally low, and it was inevitable that the profit was reduced. We can't blame all the problems on Wanru. Second brother is not blaming Wanru. She is in charge of the family business. We don't know what to do, so it is reasonable to ask. Yes, this is our family business. We can't always be blind. This is also for the sake of the Lin family. In the meeting hall, everyone was clearly divided into 3 camps. One of them was led by Lin Xuan, who was holding on to the matter of profits. It was obvious that he had something else to say. The other side was speaking up for Lin Wanru, but there weren't many of them. Those who were neutral were still the majority. No matter what, it was not their turn to be in charge of the Lin family. No matter who the business was handed over to, they would get money every year. As long as there was a lot of money, there was no need for them to take sides. Stop talking. Wanru is here. Let's see what she has to say, someone suddenly stood up and said. Everyone turned to look at the door. Lin Wanru walked in from outside. She nodded slightly at everyone, then looked at Lin Xuan and asked, "Second uncle, did you ask me to come here for something important?" "There is really one thing that is more important." Lin Xuan nodded and said, "Yesterday, I looked through the account and found that the investment of our Lin family last year was 20% more than the year before. Why did the profit decrease? This is really unreasonable. The business of the Lin family has always been managed by Wanru. I'm afraid that Wanru has to give all of us an explanation for this matter, right?" Lin Wanru looked at him and asked, "In business, there are profits and losses. It is normal to have a small fluctuation in profit, isn't it?" Lin Xuan smiled and said, "What Wanru said is true. There are profits and losses in business, but last year was obviously a good year. It is impossible for the profit not to increase but decrease. Of course, I don't mean anything else. It's just that the Lin family belongs to all of us. The Lin family needs all of us to protect it. It concerns the interests of all of us, so we can't be careless." Lin Xuan had a smile on his face, as if he was thinking for everyone's sake. "So, what do you mean, second uncle?" Lin Wanru looked at him and asked. Lin Xuan said with a smile, "There are so many people in the Lin family. We also feel sorry to let you, a girl, take care of it inside and outside. Such a heavy burden falls on you, and it is inevitable that there will be such negligence. So, I think it is better to divide the other 2 shops and hand them over to others to manage. In this way, you will be much more relaxed and can concentrate more." The unspoken implication of his words was that Lin Wanru, as a woman, was unable to manage such a large Lin family. That was why there was a loss this time. It was better for her to give up her power early on. That way, everyone's interests could be guaranteed. I think second uncle is right. Yes, Wanru should also have a good rest. I agree. As soon as Lin Xuan finished his words, many people immediately responded. Many people in the Lin family had already complained about handing over the family business to a girl. Naturally, they would take the opportunity to push it. Even some people, who had always been neutral, were a little shaken. Lin Wanru sighed and said, "We are all family, second uncle, why do you have to be so persistent?" Lin Xuan's expression changed when he heard that. He said, "Wanru, what do you mean? Second uncle is also thinking for the Lin family and for you. Do you think second uncle is harming you? So, second uncle is really not going to let us go this time?" Lin Wanru looked at him again and said, You really take my good intentions for ill intentions." Lin Xuan said with a face full of anger, "I am doing this for the Lin family. Why can't you understand? In that case." Lin Wanru looked at him and said, "From today onwards, second uncle doesn't need to worry about the supply of goods from the shop in the north of the city. I will arrange for someone else to take over." After saying that, she turned to look at the other 2 people and said, "Third uncle, fourth uncle, you don't need to go to the shop today. I will arrange for a new shopkeeper as soon as possible." As soon as Lin Wanru's voice fell, the hall suddenly became quiet. Many people raised their heads and looked at her in disbelief. How could she still say such words at this time? Lin Xuan was stunned. Instead of being angry, he laughed and said, "Wanru, do you really think that the Lin family is your Lin family? I'm afraid no one will agree to such an overbearing attitude." He looked back at the people in the hall and said, "You have all seen how overbearing she has been in the past 2 years. Since when did a woman have the right to be in charge of the Lin family? Second uncle, don't be so agitated." Lin Wanru shook her head and looked at him. She said, "When I came over just now, I sent someone to report to the authorities. Second uncle colluded with the Bai family who supplied the goods and took 17,652 taels of silver from the shop in a year. This is already more than 10% of the Lin family's annual profit. For embezzling so much silver, I'm afraid you will have to go to prison for decades. But second uncle, you don't need to worry. I will take care of everything after this for you. Aunt has entered the Lin family, so she is a member of the Lin family. You can go in peace. The family will take good care of her. If Aunt wants to remarry, we will find a good husband for her. Xiao Fei has already grown up and can take care of himself. The family will not mistreat him. You don't need to worry about this." Lin Wanru said these words calmly, but it set off a storm in the hearts of the people. You. Lin Xuan was stunned for a moment, and his expression changed greatly. He opened his mouth and was about to speak, but Lin Wanru waved her hand and said, "Second uncle, you don't need to thank me. We are all family. This is what I should do." After saying this, she added, "The people from the Yamen should be here soon. Second uncle, don't you want to go back and prepare?" Chapter 672. You don't have any evidence. Don't slander me. Lin Xuan's face turned from green to white and then to green again. A trace of disbelief quickly appeared on his face, but it soon disappeared. He pointed at Lin Wanru and said, "You want to firmly control the Lin family and can't bear to let go of power, so you use this despicable method to frame your second uncle. You don't care about the Lin family, do you still care about me, your second uncle?" "It's because I care about the Lin family and second uncle, so I wanted to suppress this matter," Lin Wanru sighed and said, but after second uncle's reminder, Wanru suddenly realized that the Lin family is not my Lin family, nor is it second uncle's Lin family. It is everyone's Lin family. Everyone trusts me so much, but Wanru actually wants to play favorites. I'm really ashamed. As for the evidence, Lin Wanru took out a few pieces of paper from her sleeve and put them on the table beside her. She said, "These are the evidence of second uncle's corruption in the past year. They are written clearly, one by one. Everyone, take a look." Lin Xuan grabbed the pieces of paper and glanced at them. His face immediately turned pale and bloodless. He knelt on the ground and cried, Wanru, please let me go. Second uncle was wrong. Second uncle was bewitched. I beg you, don't report me to the authorities. I don't want to go to jail, The second master of the Lin family, who had been righteously indignant and said that he was thinking for the sake of the Lin family, was now in tears and snot. He no longer mentioned the matter of breaking up the shop. He knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, almost kowtowing. The others looked at each other when they saw this. Someone took the pieces of paper and glanced at them. His face immediately changed. Second brother, why did you, 18,000 taels of silver. You've taken all the money that was missing. You said Wanru, so it was you. Looking at Lin Xuan's performance, they didn't doubt the authenticity of these pieces of paper at all. The hall immediately burst into an uproar. Lin Wanru shifted her position slightly and stood beside Lin Xuan, not letting him face her directly. She looked at the crowd and said, after all, this is our Lin family's matter. What do you all think we should do about it? The noise in the hall decreased slightly. Everyone looked at each other and didn't say anything. This matter was really difficult to deal with. After all, Lin Shuwen was a member of the Lin family. If they really took him to court, it would be a disgrace to the Lin family, and it would be detrimental to the stability of the Lin family. However, if they just let it go and pretend that they didn't see it, they wouldn't be able to convince the masses. After a moment, an old man sighed and said, although Shu Wen is wrong, he is still a member of our Lin family. We don't need to trouble the authorities with this matter, right? Another man nodded and said, Third uncle's words are reasonable. We shouldn't wash our dirty linen in public. If it gets out, our Lin family will become the laughingstock of Feng State City. We don't need to trouble the authorities. Wanru, what do you think we should do about this matter? Someone shook his head and looked at Lin Wanru. Lin Shuwen suddenly raised his head, and a glimmer of hope emerged in his eyes. Lin Wanru was silent for a moment. Then she said, Second uncle, you don't need to worry about the supply of goods in the store. I will slowly deduct the money from the second branch's money. Thank you, Wanru. Thank you, Wanru. Lin Shuwen stood up from the ground, wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, and said repeatedly. Lin Wanru turned her head and looked at the other two men. Third uncle, fourth uncle, you don't need to busy yourself with the matters of the store for the next 2 days. I will arrange for a new shopkeeper to go there in a few days. The two men were stunned. They weren't the ones who were embezzling. What did it have to do with them? Wanru, this. I'm afraid this isn't appropriate. One of the men opened his mouth with a troubled expression. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by someone behind him. Let's do it this way. Wanru, you can arrange these things. We will listen to you when it comes to the business. Yes, yes, yes. Third brother, fourth brother, just do what I ask you to do. Why are you asking so many questions? Someone else said. Okay. Seeing that people kept speaking up, the two men's faces gradually showed despair. In the end, they could only grit their teeth and agree. The store is busy. If there's nothing else, I will leave first. Lin Wanru looked at the crowd and said. No, no. Wanru, you go ahead. The matter of the store is more important. It's fine here. Remember to inform the authorities and say that it's a misunderstanding. When the crowd heard this, they all spoke up. If it wasn't necessary, they wouldn't want to stay with her. Even if she stood there without saying a word, she would give them an invisible layer of pressure. Today was clearly a drama of the second branch forcing the Lin family to abdicate. In the end, the second, third, and fourth branches suffered a double loss. They had completely lost their business with the Lin family. Delegating power had turned into taking it back. In the future, her words in the Lin family would only have more weight. Watching her leave, then looking at Lin Shuwen who was covered in cold sweat, many people secretly shook their heads. They had underestimated the eldest daughter of the Lin family. Lin Yong leaned against the door and grinned. When he saw Lin Wanru coming out, he hurriedly followed her. Miss, where are we going now? Lin Wanru walked past a moon door and said, to the store. Lin Yong scratched his head and asked doubtfully, to the store. Isn't that going to the yamen? Why are we going to the yamen? Lin Wanru said as she walked, there's a new batch of goods that was delayed for 2 days. Remember to hurry them up, won't the authorities send people to arrest second master? Lin Yong was stunned, but he didn't care too much. Of course, he wanted to go to the store and not the yamen. Seeing that it was almost mealtime, it wasn't a bad idea to go to the Li brothers' place for a bowl of porridge. To be honest, he had never tasted such delicious porridge in his life. Although it wasn't full, he felt full of energy after drinking it. He could finally raise his head in front of his mother-in-law at night. It was just that he was prone to nosebleeds after eating, so he always had a cloth to block it. In the small courtyard next to Fonglen Park, the mealtime today was 15 minutes earlier than usual. If it was mealtime and Brother Lin got 2 bowls of porridge, there wouldn't be enough food for 2 people. These were all things that burned money. Times were different now. Even a penny had to be split in half. With those medicinal herbs, Mississippi Lou's body recovered very well. Now she could walk on her own without help. Of course, she still couldn't use her true chi. Most of the time, she could only listen obediently. Li Yi could do whatever he wanted for the time being and didn't have to worry about her revenge. However, he had to think of another way to earn more money. This time, he couldn't find a jade pendant that was worth 1,000 taels of silver. Just as he was worrying, there was a knock on the door. Lin Yong didn't have the habit of knocking on the door. Li Yi looked up at Lin Wanru and asked, "Has the matter of the account been settled?" After all, he had received so much kindness from the girl. If he could do something for her, it would be a way to repay the favor. "It's settled." Lin Wanru nodded and said, "Thank you this time." If it weren't for those pieces of paper, the matter this time would actually be a little troublesome. She had never doubted that there would be so many problems with the accounts that had been checked. This time, the scholar that she picked up really gave her a big surprise. Li Yi waved his hand and said, "You're welcome. This is the duty of an accountant." A rare smile appeared on Lin Wanru's face. She said, "It's just a temporary measure. You don't have to take it seriously. To be honest, this time, you have indeed helped me solve a big problem." Nearly 20,000 taels of silver had permanently swept away the unstable elements within the family. A few days ago, Lin Wanru had never thought that this scholar she had picked up from the streets would be of such great help to her. Lin Wanru looked at him and said, "I don't like to owe favors. If you have any difficulties, feel free to tell me. If it's something that I can do, I will do my best to help you." Li Yi looked at her and asked, "Do you really have to thank me?" Lin Wanru nodded. "To be honest, I don't like to owe favors either." Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Actually, in the past, when someone asked me to check the accounts, something terrible would happen. The price was not small, but this time, let's forget about it. You've helped me, and I've helped you. We don't owe each other anything. How about it?" Lin Wanru nodded and turned to walk outside. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned back to ask, "I don't know. What do you mean by something terrible?" After saying this, she felt that this sentence was a little redundant. Without waiting for Li Yi to answer, she shook her head and turned to leave. In the courtyard, Li Yi sighed and said slowly, "The court is unstable. Officials are stripped of their titles, their properties are confiscated, and they are exiled. People are beheaded." Chapter 673. Confiscation, banishment, beheading, Lin Wanru murmured as she walked back to the shop. Then, she shook her head and walked into the shop. When the man called Lin Yong saw her, he immediately walked over and said with a smile, "Miss, we really made the right decision to buy this horse this time. Many people have come to see it these past few days. There's a lot more business every day than before." Colored glaze was a treasure among treasures. It was rare to see it, even in a jewelry store, let alone such a large horse stepping on a swallow. These days, the flow of customers in Fonglin Garden had greatly increased. Although many people came to see the colored glaze and gain knowledge, it was indeed a great boost to the business of the shop. Lin Yong looked at the colored glaze with his eyes shining. He said, "Many people came to inquire about the price of this treasure, but I refused them all. This is the most precious treasure of our Fonglin garden. I won't sell it no matter how much money you offer." In a small courtyard next to fragrant forest park, Li Yi was fanning the fire with a small fan in his hand. He had wanted to remind Miss Lin to sell off the flying swallow grass while it was still possible. If some ill-intentioned person came to the kingdom of Qi and tried to sell it off as soon as possible, this thing would be ruined. However, after being disturbed by her just now, he completely forgot this matter. He could only think about it next time. Mississippi Lu had been recuperating at home these days. She didn't go out at all. If she stayed for a long time, she might get sick. Therefore, he planned to go out with her at night. On the one hand, it was to relax. On the other hand, he could experience the nightlife of the people in the Qi Kingdom. If it weren't for Mississippi Lu, he could also study the similarities and differences of the brothel culture between the Qi Kingdom and the Jing Kingdom. As an important political and military city, the curfew system in Fengzhou City was very strict. For many cities in the back of the city, nightlife just started after 9 p.m. But in this city, people were not allowed to appear on the streets after 9 p.m. The consequences of violating this prohibition were very serious. However, the more severe and oppressive the system was, the more brilliant and prosperous things would be born. The night market in the city, which was even busier than during the day, was a product of this. In less than 2 hours, the whole city was in a carnival. A narrow river flowed through the city. The surface of the river was sparkling. Pleasure boats passed through it. Pedestrians weaved along the riverbank. The hawkers along the street shouted their wares incessantly. The tea houses and taverns along the street were thriving. Sitting on a tall building by the water, he took a sip of wine and looked down at the women dancing gracefully with their sleeves fluttering in the wind. Li Yi sighed. How long had it been since he had been so carefree? This was just a city at the border of the Qi Kingdom, but it gave people a feeling that it was more prosperous than the capital of the Jing Kingdom. After coming to the Qi Kingdom, Li Yi deeply felt that it was not without reason that the Jing Kingdom had been suppressed by them for so many years. Putting down the wine cup, he casually slapped away Mississippi Lu's hand that was reaching for the wine pot. He glanced at her and said, "My body hasn't recovered yet. I don't know if I can drink. Just 1 cup." Mississippi Lu looked at him and said, "Not even 1 cup." Li Yi refused without hesitation. Mississippi Lu glared at him, but she did not insist. Li Yi looked at her with satisfaction. He felt a sense of accomplishment in his heart. Recently, Mississippi Lu had become more and more obedient. If she could maintain this attitude after she recovered, how wonderful would life be? Next up is Miss Ying. Young Master Zhao presents her with 100 taels of silver. Chen presents her with 300 taels of silver. Young Master Yang presents her with a poem. Young Master Qian presents her with 1,000 taels of silver. The voices that came from downstairs from time to time always interrupted his daydream. Li Yi looked discontentedly at the high platform below. At this moment, there was a new girl on the high platform. She was holding a pipa and playing it while performing difficult dance moves. It was very tempting. No wonder those young masters were giving her poems like crazy. In the blink of an eye, a few hundred taels of silver were already in her hands. All she had to do was twist her waist. Li Yi was very envious of her. If he had this kind of ability, he would not have to worry about money. Not long after the song ended, the duck-like voice called out again, "Miss Ying invites young Master Yang upstairs for a chat." There was a sudden uproar below. Many people had just given silver taels of silver, but this Miss Ying just had to invite young Master Yang who gave the poem upstairs. It seemed that the poem had moved Miss Ying. Some people were envious while others sighed. Wealth was easy to come by, but talent was hard to come by. These famous prostitutes in Feng Province were proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. No matter which one of them, they could be crowned as a talented woman. Their daily contacts were all famous talents from all walks of life. They had never been interested in idiots who only knew how to throw money. "Why, are you moved?" Mississippi Lou glanced at Lee and asked casually when she saw him looking down with an envious face. Lee nodded and said, "Yes, 1,000 taels of silver, but it didn't even make a splash. It's such a pity. If you gave it to us, you would have enough medicine for next month." Mississippi Lou was startled, then she shook her head and said, "Medicinal herbs are just auxiliary, it's not necessary. That being said, the sooner Mississippi Lou recovered, the sooner they could go back." Lee sighed, "You can't stop taking medicine." Below the pavilion, the topic of the crowd had shifted from Miss Ying to another woman on the stage. At this moment, the woman who was dancing to the music was also a famous prostitute in Phong Province. In terms of fame, she was no less than the former. A slightly chubby young man dressed like a scholar and holding a folding fan in his hand sighed and turned away from the crowd. "Hey, isn't this the rich young master who throws money away? There are still a lot of programs later. Why did he leave so early?" Young Master Ying threw money away, but he still couldn't win Miss Ying's heart. "What a pity, what a pity," several voices came from the front. The slightly chubby young man looked up and saw a group of young people coming over. His expression changed slightly. "I don't want to cause trouble today. Get out of the way," he said in a low voice. Then, he forcefully pushed the crowd aside and strode outside. "Humph, he's just a guy who stinks of money. Why is he pretending to be a scholar? Does he really think that holding a folding fan makes him a scholar? He even wants to attract Miss Ying's attention. He's just a toad lusting for swan meat. He's just an idiot. If it weren't for his rich father, I'm afraid he wouldn't even be able to enter this place." Hearing the mocking voices coming from behind, the young man's body trembled. His face turned pale, but his footsteps became faster. Bullsh *T scholar. So what if he can write a few poems? At the entrance of the pavilion, the slightly chubby young man stood by the side of the road. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Although he said so, his face was full of unwillingness and helplessness. He looked back again and was ready to leave. "What's wrong? Are you unwilling?" At this moment, an abrupt voice suddenly came from the dark alley beside him. The voice was full of temptation. The young man suddenly turned his head and looked into the darkness. He asked vigilantly, "Who is it?" Chapter 674. Who are you? Hearing the voice in the dark alley, the slightly plump young man took a few steps back. Looking at the figure in the dark, his gaze was still vigilant as he asked slowly. "It doesn't matter who I am." In the dark alley, the voice drifted, faintly discernible. "What's important is that I can help you." The young man asked suspiciously, "Help me with what?" The voice said leisurely, "So that you don't have to worry about not being able to write a good poem. You don't have to worry about not being able to get a girl. You don't have to worry about being mocked by those so-called scholars, not being able to get a girl." The man asked doubtfully. "No woman will care about you." The voice raised its pitch. The young man was stunned for a moment before realizing something. He blurted out, "You want to teach me how to write a poem?" This time, the voice paused for a long time. "Do you think you're cut out for it?" "What do you mean?" the young man asked doubtfully. "It's very simple. You hand over the money and I hand over the poem. You hand over the money and I'll give you the poem. Once you hand over the money, the poem is yours. You can sign your name and use it however you want." The young man hesitated for a moment before saying, How do I know you're not just casually writing a few sentences to trick me? Why do you have so many questions? The voice in the dark became impatient. Buy it if you want. If not, I'm leaving. Wait a minute. Some images appeared in his mind. The young man clenched his fists. After his expression changed, he gritted his teeth and asked, "How much is your poem?" "Ranging from 100 taels to 10,000 taels. There are many prices and many choices. We can accept custom-made poems. Love between men and women, brotherly love, gay love, patriotism. Buy 5, get 1 free. Buy 10, get 3 free. The price is fair." The young man asked doubtfully, "Your poem can surpass that, young. If you just want to surpass that poem, I suggest you buy one that costs 100 taels. If you want to amaze the world and impress that Ying lady, 1,000 taels is enough. If you're willing to pay 10,000 taels, Zhao Xuan will be nothing. In the future, you'll be the new poetry saint of the Qi kingdom." The voice was extremely fleeting and full of charm. It came from the dark. "How about it? Do you want to consider it?" "I want 1,000 taels." After a moment of silence, there was a response from outside. "Just a moment." Something seemed to move in the darkness. The young man seemed to hear a strange sound, and then it went silent. After a quarter of an hour, a voice came from the darkness again. Then, the young man saw a folded piece of paper being handed out from the darkness. He carefully walked over and reached out his hand. The piece of paper shrunk a little. He was taken aback for a moment, then he came back to his senses. He fumbled in his bosom for a while, then handed over a stack of paper and said, "There's a total of 1,000 taels of silver here. You can exchange it for silver at any Qian's bank in the Qi kingdom. Aren't you afraid that I'll lie to you?" After receiving the banknotes, the voice in the darkness came again. The slightly plump young man shook his head and said, "It's only about 1,000 taels of silver. I'll have it if I save a day's allowance." There was no more sound in the darkness. He held the piece of paper and waited for a while. When he gathered his courage and walked into the alley, he found that there was no one there. "Where did you go just now?" After Li Yi returned upstairs and sat down, Mississippi Lu glanced at him and asked, "I went downstairs to get some fresh air and bought some things." Li Yi put a bag of desserts on the table. He bought them from the shop where he borrowed pen and paper. They tasted pretty good. He had to admit that the guy just now was quite bold. He gave away 1,000 taels of silver without hesitation. Even when Li Yi was at his most prodigal, he didn't do this. He always gave 120,000 taels of silver to Mississippi Lu. He was a little thirsty after talking nonsense with that guy for a long time. The alcohol content here wasn't high, so it could be used as a drink to quench his thirst. Li Yi picked up the wine pot, not a drop of wine was poured out. He looked at Mississippi Lu and gradually narrowed his eyes. "It's getting late. I should go back and rest." Mississippi Lu stood up decisively and turned to walk downstairs. Li Yi walked down with a sullen face. When he walked out of the door, he brushed past a slightly chubby young man. "Stop right there. Don't think that this matter will be over just like that." After a slight pause, he strode in the direction of Mississippi Lu. The young man looked back strangely, shook his head, and turned around. After almost an hour, he walked into the attic again. In the hall, several young people dressed like scholars gathered together. They watched the program on the screen while whispering to each other. "That guy with the surname Qian really thinks that he can buy anything with money. We don't want to be associated with such a vulgar person. That guy with the surname Qian is a joke. Let's not talk about him. Do you think that Miss Ying will be able to sleep with Yang Yanqing today?" "Impossible. Although Yang Yanqing has some talent in poetry, he's far behind his brother. I think Miss Yingying is only doing this for that person's sake. Otherwise, I'm afraid she wouldn't be able to meet him today. I've long heard that Miss Yingying is interested in that person. However, with her status, she's still too far behind. Maybe she's going to settle for the second best, it's also possible. After all, that person is appreciated by the third prince. Miss Yingying is not worthy of him. A few people were chatting about some things when they were suddenly interrupted by a voice. Qian Duo, young Master Qian, give Miss Shishir a poem. In the past, when a lady performed on the stage, if there was a gift of money or a poem, someone would read it out loud to let everyone know. After all, many people did it for the sake of their reputation. If there was no splash of water, they might not do the same thing again in the future. Therefore, in such a place, there would be someone in charge of this matter. Those who frequented this place were already used to it. However, this time, when they heard this sentence, many people were stunned. This included the lady named Shishir who was playing on the stage. Her pretty face was filled with astonishment, and her music was a little chaotic. They naturally knew who Qian Duo was. He was the famous young Master Qian in Fengzhou City. The Qian family's banks were opened all over the Qi kingdom. Their business was flourishing everywhere. In the entire Fengzhou City, there were not many families that were richer than the Qian family. The son of a businessman was looked down upon by others. He should have kept a low profile. However, this young Master Qian did not know how to keep a low profile at all. Usually, he boasted that he was a gifted scholar and often lingered in such places. He had spent a lot of money several times, but he did not even get to see the face of a lady. He had become a laughing stock in the eyes of the crowd. Everyone knew that this young Master Qian was a complete idiot. At this time, he was learning from others to compose a poem. Haha, young Master Qian, a poem, read it, quickly read it out. Let us see what kind of masterpiece young Master Qian has. No, read it later. Let me laugh for a while. In an instant, some people could not help but laugh out loud. The atmosphere in the hall became a little lively. In their eyes, young Master Qian knew how to compose a poem. It was no different from a rooster laying eggs or an iron tree blooming. It was simply a fantasy. At this moment, the crowd only treated it as a joke. Hearing the various voices around him, Qian Duo's expression changed. He pretended to be indifferent, but his fists in his sleeves were already tightly clenched. He had read the poem just now. Although he could not see anything special about it, it was quite smooth to read. There was one word that he did not know. He only found out after asking someone. It should be better than that surnamed Yang, right? In the corner, there was a person holding a piece of paper in his hand. Under the urging of the crowd, he read it out loud. Kai Xiao attentively held the jade bell. That year, she fought to be drunk and blushed. Dancing low in the willow house under the moon, she sang the wind at the bottom of the peach blossom fan. After parting, I remembered our meeting. How many times did my soul dream with you? Tonight, with only the silver lamp shining, I fear that our meeting is a dream. Those who could linger in this kind of place were mostly scholars. They usually boasted that they were outstanding and talented. Those they interacted with were all scholars. More or less, they had some talent. Otherwise, they would not have been able to fool the crowd. After that person read 2 lines, the mocking voices in the hall quieted down. Until the last line, I fear that our meeting is a dream, was read out, there was no more noise. Countless people were stunned. They turned around to look at Qian Duo and swallowed their saliva in disbelief. Was this poem really written by that idiot Qian Duo? The woman on the stage was also stunned. She muttered a few lines and felt some kind of emotion. When she looked down the stage again, her eyes were a little hazy. At the door of a certain room upstairs, the woman called Anying opened her mouth slightly. The man opposite her was also surprised. Even if Qian Duo did not understand poetry, because of his background, his ability to observe people's expressions was far beyond that of ordinary people. Looking at the eyes and expressions of the people around him, he knew that the 1,000 taels he spent just now was really King worth it. Especially when he saw those so-called scholars, their expressions were as if they had seen a ghost. The carefree feeling in his heart was indescribable. He hummed a strange tune and walked out of the door alone under the stunned silence of the crowd. Just as he was about to walk out, he seemed to have thought of something. He turned around and walked to a table. The servant looked at him in a daze and asked, "Young Master Qian, is there anything else?" Qian Duo curled his lips and said, "That 1,000 taels of silver was wrong. Give it back to me. I can't control you, but your sister can. When I go back in a few days, I will tell her everything you did here one by one." There was still an hour before the curfew. The streets of Feng State City had already become sparse. Li Yi scolded as he walked. He did not hear a response for a long time. He looked back and saw that Mississippi Lu was already breathing evenly. He shook his head and sighed helplessly. "I can't control it anymore." The 3 words, "fragrant forest garden," were vaguely visible under the illumination of the fireworks in the night sky. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.